Greetings, fellow Taoists. Before we dive into today's chapter, I want to take a moment to say thank you. Even though my main channel was demonetized, you all still followed me here to this new home. Your support is the only reason I'm still standing. A special shout out to John8 for your generous donation. Huge thanks also to my fellow Taoists, Narior 6712, Mika 4709, Fernan 1901, Caroyle Wildwood, and many others who have supported me across both the old and new channels. I can't list every single name, but please know that I am deeply grateful to each and every one of you. Although the subtitles for Korean, French, Turkish, Hindi, and other languages are still limited, I hope for your understanding. As this is a new channel, it will take some time to unlock advanced features. I've been a bit busy lately, but I promise our community this. I will finish this series, no matter what happens. Interestingly, I've noticed that YouTube is still running ads on this new channel, even though it hasn't met the requirements for sub count or watch hours yet. It's quite ironic that they call my content mass-produced and useless, yet they still find it useful enough to run ads on. If you enjoy my work and would like to buy me a coffee, you can do so via the PayPal link in the description. Now let's continue our journey. Half a year flew by in the blink of an eye. On this day, the world's origin chi in a certain area on the outskirts of the Black Wind Sea suddenly began to churn violently, and countless dark clouds appeared in the sky before forming a massive vortex. Immense law fluctuations were emanating from the dark clouds, raising turbulent waves of the nearby sea and sweeping up ferocious gusts of wind. Thankfully, this area was quite close to the soul-stirring winds, so the disturbance wasn't all that apparent. The black cloud churned and rumbled for a while before a thick pillar of black light shot down from the vortex amid a resounding boom. There seemed to be nothing but empty sea down below, but all of a sudden, multiple layers of restrictions appeared in the path of the pillar of black light. In the blink of an eye, the pillar of black light pierced through these light barriers before continuing onward, only to be stopped cold in its tracks by a gray mountain projection. An earth-shattering boom rang out as the surrounding space shuddered, as did the nearby sea, and a series of massive rifts appeared on the seabed. After releasing that pillar of black light, the black cloud up above quickly dispersed, and the restrictions above the surface of the sea also faded to reveal Han Li. His complexion was looking a little pale, but there was an elated look on his face. He exhaled as he swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a ball of bright azure light that revolved rapidly around the island, gathering all of the formation tools distributed throughout the island before returning them up his sleeve. In the next instant, Han Li began to make a rapid string of hand seals, and arcs of golden lighting appeared over his body before spreading outward to form a golden lightning formation. Immediately thereafter, Han Li vanished from the formation amid a rumbling thunderclap. A tall and imposing figure was seated in a dim space somewhere in the Black Wind Sea. Their entire body was enshrouded within a layer of black mist, making it impossible to catch a clear glimpse of them, and there was a menacing aura emanating out of the black mist. There were several other figures seated around the tall figure, but none of them dared to get too close. Right at this moment, all of the black mist around the tall figure surged into their body, revealing none other than Zaya Jinhin. A peculiar look appeared on his face as he cast his gaze toward a certain direction while rising to his feet, and everyone else around him hurriedly stood up as well. These were none other than the golden, immortal stage elders of the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, and Deputy Palace Master Zhu Wang was also among them. "What is it, Palace Master?" Zhu Wang asked in a respectful voice. Zio Jinhin paid no heed to her, as he flipped a hand over to produce a white jade plate that was around the size of a wash basin. The entire plate seemed to have been crafted from some type of white jade material, and there were many antiquated designs etched onto the edge of the plate, while a series of white jade grids were present on the plate, slowly revolving around the plate's center. Gentle white light was radiating from the plate, while a streak of black light had emerged in one of the grids on the edge of the plate, presenting a stark contrast. However, the black light only flashed a few times before quickly fading away, but a hint of law fluctuations could still be detected from the black light before it vanished. Has someone refined a Dao pill? Xiao Jinhin murmured to himself. A hint of surprise appeared on Zhu Weiying's face as she said, "There's no way that there would be a Dao pill master in a place as secluded as the Black Wind Sea. Could it be someone from the Vast Flow Palace or the Dawnfall sect? But why would they refine a Dao pill at a time like this? I don't have an answer to that. Perhaps they're trying to use some type of alternative method to find the entrance of the Immortal manor," Xiao Jinhin speculated. He then flipped a hand over to stow the white jade plate away, before making his way toward a giant blue gate of light not far in front of him. The gate was over 1,000 feet in size, with countless antiquated patterns engraved onto its frame, and it was radiating dazzling blue light. The light at the center of the gate was even brighter, and it resembled flowing water, forming a blue vortex. Occasionally, the blue light at the center of the gate would abruptly brighten before spreading outward, and there were 9 giant white jade pillars standing around the gate of light, with each one riddled with profound engravings. The ground surrounding the 9 pillars were also covered in complex patterns, forming an enormous formation, and at the top of each pillar sat a cultivator with their legs crossed. The 3 Dao lords led by Aoyang Qiushan were among them, and they were chanting a collective incantation. Radiant white light was surging out of the jade pillars and the formation, forming a thick white light barrier that encompassed the entire gate of light. With each eruption of blue light, the white light barrier would shudder violently, as would the 9 surrounding jade pillars and the cultivators seated atop them. The closer we get to the emergence of the Immortal manor, the more powerful the tremors will become, so make sure to be on your guard and don't slip up at this crucial juncture, Xiao Jinhin instructed. Rest assured, Palace Master, we've made extensive preparations for this, and we'll make sure that nothing goes wrong, Zhu Weiying replied in a confident manner. On top of that, keep a closer eye on Aoyang Qiushan and the other Dao lords. Make sure that they're not slacking off, Xiao Jinhin said. They wouldn't dare, Zhu Weiying replied with a cold smile. Besides, now that we're already here, they have no choice but to comply. Xiao Jinhin nodded in response, then asked, "How are things going outside?" "The people of the Dawnfall sect and the Vast Flow Palace are still searching frantically for us like headless chickens, but they haven't made any progress," Zhu Weiying reported with immense schadenfreude in her voice. A pleased smile appeared on Xiao Jinhin's face upon hearing this, following which he said, "They're not a major concern of ours. What are the people of the Reincarnation Palace up to?" The people of the Reincarnation Palace remain as secretive as ever, but even if they discover the outermost restrictions, if they try to break through those restrictions by force, the trap that we set up would be activated. It may not be able to wipe them all out, but it'll be sure to pose them a great deal of trouble, and even if they can break through, it'll take them at least a year or so, by which time the entrance of the infernal frost Immortal manor would have already closed long ago, Zhu Weiying replied with a smile. Xiao Jinhin gave a pleased nod in response, then cast his gaze toward the blue gate of light with a look of yearning in his eyes. Right at this moment, a burst of white light suddenly emerged on the body of a nearby white-robed cultivator. This was none other than the man with the Feng surname who had arrived in the Black Wind Sea in advance, and a hint of surprise appeared on his face as he flipped a hand over to summon a white formation plate. A small line of text appeared on the formation plate, and his expression instantly changed drastically after taking a glance. He hurriedly made his way toward Zio Jinhin as he declared, "We have bad news, Palace Master." Arcs of golden lightning sprang out of thin air in the sky near Dark Vale Island, following which a golden lightning formation took shape. Han Li appeared within the formation before inspecting his surroundings while also releasing his spiritual sense, and only after confirming that the nearby area was safe did he flip a hand over to produce a jade box, which contained the Origin Void pill. Even though he had previously successfully refined this pill, he was still only able to refine a single one after using up all of the remaining batches of ingredients. A thoughtful look appeared in his eyes as he inspected the Origin Void pill in his hand. Through this pill refinement, Han Li had gained a deeper understanding of the pill. It was very similar to a Dao pill, but its intended purpose seemed to be different. However, he had no idea what its exact purpose was supposed to be. He inspected the pill for a while longer before stowing it away, then cast his gaze forward with slightly furrowed brows. Another half a year had passed by without any updates from Taoist Hu Yan, and he couldn't help but wonder if something had gone wrong. Han Li was silent for a moment before flipping a hand over to produce the Crimson Communication Formation plate, then cast an incantation seal into it, and a crimson formation immediately emerged. He communicated a message into the formation, but even after a long wait, there was still no response from Taoist Hu Yan. Han Li's brows became tightly furrowed upon seeing this. After a brief moment of contemplation, he flew into the sea while putting on his Transient Guild mask. If something really had gone wrong with the Infernal Frost Immortal manor, there should be some information on the subject being exchanged in the Transient Guild. As soon as he put on his Transient Guild, Han Li was immediately rooted to the spot. At the moment, the information exchange section of the Transient Guild was in a state of complete pandemonium, and he hurriedly began to read through the pieces of information being released. During these past few years, he had either been busy refining his heavy water true axis or refining his Origin Void pill, so he hadn't kept up to date with the latest information on the Infernal Frost Immortal manor. It seemed that the entrance of the Immortal manor still hadn't appeared during the past 3 years, and all of the powers were searching frantically for it. However, the reason why the Transient Guild had been stirred up into such a frenzy was due to the release of a certain piece of information. The entrance of the Immortal manor is under Red Moon Island. It was unclear whether this information was actually accurate, but it had created a massive stir in the Transient Guild, nonetheless. Red Moon Island, Han Li murmured to himself. This was a very familiar place to him. Was the entrance of the Infernal Frost Immortal manor really situated under that island? A contemplative look appeared on his face as he flipped a hand over to summon the hard ink crystal that had been given to him by the pig dolphin beast. It had found the crystal near Red Moon Island, and Worm 3 seemed to have been quite interested in it. It seemed that all of the signs were pointing to Red Moon Island. Perhaps it really is true. Right at this moment, the communication formation beside Han Li suddenly lit up, following which a crimson projection of Taoist Hu Yan appeared, and it declared, "Fellow Taoist Li, come meet us at Sea Fig Island right away." This was the exact same island that all of the Transient Guild members had been instructed to assemble at prior to carrying out the mission on Red Moon Island. Sea Fig Island. Could it be that the entrance of the Infernal Frost Immortal manor really is beneath Red Moon Island? It sounds like you've also seen that piece of information circulating in the guild. The news is most likely true, so come and meet up with us right now, Taoist Hu Yan urged. All right, I'll set off right away, Han Li replied with a nod, then concluded the communication and stowed the communication formation plate away before flying toward the surface of the sea. Moments later, a streak of azure light emerged from the sea, then flew away into the distance. Elsewhere in the Black Wind Sea, all of the vast Flow Palace's cultivators were traveling on a large blue flying boat. Red Moon Island. Its location isn't very secluded, nor is it close to the center of the Black Wind Sea, so it can be easily missed. Luo Qinghai murmured to himself with a contemplative expression as he stood at the bow of the boat. Hovering in front of him was a small blue light screen that depicted all of the islands littered throughout the Black Wind Sea. At this moment, there were 4 people standing behind him, consisting of a middle-aged man wearing a feathered hat, a young scholar with a fair complexion holding a blue feather fan, a quiet and serious-looking elderly man with a black beard, and a man wearing a conical bamboo hat that was positioned very low to conceal his facial features. What was particularly noteworthy was that the man in the conical bamboo hat was missing both of his arms. As for the other vast Flow Palace cultivators, including Nan Keming, they were all standing a bit further away. I did previously conduct a search on Red Moon Island, but at the time, I wasn't able to find anything. Perhaps I was too negligent, the young scholar said, slightly furrowed brows. If the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace really did set up concealment restrictions well in advance, then it would be impossible to uncover the location of the entrance through conventional means, so don't blame yourself. I don't know who leaked this piece of information, but my intuition tells me that it's true, Luo Qinghai said. A hint of excitement appeared on the young scholar's face upon hearing this, and the serious-looking elderly man also raised his head with a faint gleam in his eyes. Even the conical bamboo hat of the armless man shifted ever so slightly, and all of the other vast Flow Palace cultivators that were further away were also displaying reactions of excitement. Luo Qinghai didn't say anything further as he made a hand seal, and the blue flying boat instantly sped up, flying onward as a giant blue shadow. In the sky above another area of the Black Wind Sea, all of the Dawnfall sect cultivators were gathered together. Do you think this piece of information is true or not, Senior Marshal Brother? The Dawnfall sect master asked as he turned to Feng Tiandu. There must be some truth to it. In any case, none of you have been able to find any leads thus far, so we may as well pursue this one, Feng Tiandu replied in an expressionless manner. A slightly awkward look appeared on the Dawnfall sect master's face as he said, "In our defense, the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace is clearly somehow concealing the entrance of the Immortal Manor, so." Before he had a chance to finish, Feng Tiandu swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a large black cloud that enveloped everyone before surging away into the distance, vanishing out of sight in the blink of an eye. Hovering in midair above a lush island was the silver-robed woman by the name of Gling. She was wearing an azure mask that was projecting an azure light screen, and she was inspecting the light screen with a hint of a smile in her eyes. Right at this moment, a ball of white light appeared on the distant horizon before rapidly approaching her, and Gling took a glance in that direction, then removed the mask on her face before stowing it away. Upon arriving above the island, the ball of white light faded to reveal the Zhu clan cultivators, and there were even more of them than last time. Fellow Taoist, have you heard the rumor that the entrance of the Immortal Manor is located beneath Red Moon Island? The square-faced elderly man asked with an excited expression. I have. That piece of news has caused quite a stir in the Transient Guild, Gling replied with a nod. Do you think the news is reliable? The square-faced elderly man asked. There are many people in the Transient Guild doubting the validity of this news, but no one has been able to present any concrete evidence against it, so there's a chance that it could be real. Regardless, we'll have to make a trip to Red Moon Island and take a look for ourselves, Gling replied. The square-faced elderly man nodded in response with a contemplative expression. I don't know much about this Red Moon Island, Gling continued. Your Zhu clan was once a local power of the Black Wind Sea, so I'm assuming you must know more than me about this island, fellow Taoist Zhu Shan. In the past, Red Moon Island wasn't all that renowned in the Black Wind Sea, and our Zhu clan left the Black Wind Sea tens of thousands of years ago. So I'm afraid I don't know much about the island either. All I've heard is that the island master was quite a renowned and formidable earthly immortal, but for some reason he was killed, and Red Moon Island has been left abandoned since then. I see, Gling mused as her eyes narrowed slightly in contemplation. Seeing as we've already decided to go to Red Moon Island, we should set off right away. If the entrance of the Immortal Manor really is there, then we have to strive to get there before anyone else, Zhu Shan urged. All right, let's go, Gling replied with a nod. Zhu Shan immediately swept a sleeve through the air upon hearing this, releasing a burst of white light that enveloped all of the Zhu clan's cultivators. But before he had a chance to do anything else, a gentle breeze suddenly blew over his back, following which a burst of sharp pain speared through his lower abdomen. He looked down to find a white snake head protruding out of his lower abdomen, and locked in the mouth of the snake was none other than his nascent soul. Zhu Shan's eyes immediately widened with incredulity. Even though there wasn't much spiritual light radiating from his body, he was wearing a compact suit of spirit armor that he had refined over the course of hundreds of thousands of years, yet it wasn't able to pose any resistance against the white snake. A burst of white flame shot out of the snake's mouth before striking the nascent soul, instantly freezing it solid. Immediately thereafter, the white snake opened its mouth up wide to devour the frozen nascent soul before shooting back toward Gling. Zhu Shan gave a muffled groan, and his body was turned around by the force of the white snake's withdrawal. Standing behind him was Gling with a cold look on her face, and a large white snake wrapped around her body, flicking its forked tongue out in a menacing fashion. "What the hell are you doing, you insane woman?" Patriarch. All of this had taken place so abruptly that only now did the Zhu clan cultivators realize that their patriarch had been attacked, and all of them immediately flared up with rage, releasing a vast formation of spirit treasures in the blink of an eye, as if they were already prepared for something like this. A cold sneer appeared on Gling's face as she swept a sleeve through the air to release a ball of golden light, which transformed into a giant golden beetle that was several hundred feet in size to keep the barrage of oncoming spirit treasures at bay. "Why?" Zhu Shan asked with great difficulty as the vitality rapidly seeped out of his body. "I only approached your Zhu clan as I wasn't familiar with the Black Wind Sea and required a guide. Now that the location of the Immortal Manor's entrance has been revealed, I no longer require your services," Gling explained in a cold voice, then flicked a finger through the air, and a hole was instantly punched through Zhu Shan's glabella. The light in his eyes faded, and his lifeless body crumpled to the ground. Gling then cast her gaze toward the giant golden beetle, which was standing firm against the barrage of spirit treasures with ease, completely unscathed by the attacks. However, it certainly didn't enjoy being attacked, and a furious look appeared in its eyes as it swept its two front legs through the air, releasing two translucent streaks of light that severed a pair of spirit treasures like a hot knife through butter. All of the Zhu clan cultivators were astonished to see this. "There's no way we can defeat her. We have to split up and run," the long-faced man roared, then flew away as a streak of white light, doing so in such a hurry that he was even leaving his spirit treasures behind. Everyone else immediately snapped back to their senses upon hearing this before also fleeing in different directions. "None of you are getting away," Gling sneered as she flicked a finger through the air, and the golden beetle instantly lashed out with its two front legs once again, releasing two thick streaks of translucent light that were each over 100 feet in length. The two streaks of light shuddered slightly, then split up into around a dozen smaller streaks of light that swept toward the Zhu clan cultivators at an astonishing speed, reaching them in the blink of an eye before slicing through their protective treasures and the protective spiritual light around their bodies with ease. A string of agonized wails rang out as all of the Zhu clan cultivators were sliced to shreds along with their spirit treasures, and a faint smile appeared on Gling's face as she swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of silver light, which swept up Zhu Shan's body before dragging it toward her. She inspected the body briefly, then stowed it away as she turned to the golden beetle with a smile and said, "Golden immortals make for good sources of sustenance, but there's no need to hurry. The best delicacies are still yet to come." After that, she withdrew the giant golden beetle as well before flying away as a streak of silver light. Several days later, on Sea Fig Island, a streak of azure light approached the island from afar, then faded to reveal a burly male figure. The man was none other than Han Li, but he had disguised himself as an unremarkable-looking middle-aged man with a dark complexion. He hovered in midair in a still manner as he inspected his surroundings with his bright-sight spirit eyes, and right at this moment, an egg-shaped blue light barrier appeared over the island down below. Immediately thereafter, an opening appeared in the light barrier, and before Han Li had a chance to do anything, a voice rang out from within the light barrier. "Come in, Tianyu." Han Li raised an eyebrow, then descended into the blue light barrier, following which the opening was instantly sealed, and the light barrier itself also vanished shortly thereafter. There was a hemispherical space that was no more than 1,000 feet in size beneath the light barrier, and the air temperature was quite high. Upon entering the space, Han Li was surprised to find a group of cultivators that were completely unfamiliar to him. However, there was a black-robed elderly man who was looking at him with a smile, and standing beside him was a woman in a yellow dress. It didn't take long for Han Li to figure out that these two were none other than Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai, and just like him, they had also adopted disguises. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Martial Uncle. I was delayed a little on the way here," Han Li said as he cupped his fist in an apologetic salute while taking a glance at the other people present. Standing behind Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai were 9 cultivators dressed in fiery red Taoist robes, each with an extremely lifelike fire raven embroidered onto the sleeve, and it seemed that they were all from the same sect. There was an unnatural flush on the faces of all 9 cultivators, and they were also giving off formidable fire attribute spiritual power fluctuations, indicating that they were all using fire attribute cultivation arts. The 9 cultivators were led by a trio that consisted of an elderly man with red hair and a red beard, a physically imposing, bare-chested man, and a middle-aged woman who appeared to be in her 40s. Their auras weren't as formidable as Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai's, but the 3 of them were clearly all golden immortals, and the elderly man's cultivation base was slightly more advanced than the other 2. "Come here, Tianyu. These are all fellow Taoists from the ancient Cloud Continent's True Flame sect, and they'll be accompanying us into the infernal Frost Immortal Manor. This is Sect Master Su Yangzi, and these 2 are Elder Zhen Yun and Elder Lu Lan. Fellow Taoists, Tianyu is my nephew, and he's a very alert young man with a decent cultivation base, so he should be of some help to us in the Immortal Manor," Taoist Hu Yan introduced with a smile. "Gu Tianyu pays his respects to the seniors of the True Flame sect," Han Li said as he cupped his fist in a respectful salute. He had heard of the True Flame sect before. On the ancient Cloud Continent, it was considered to only be below the top 3 sects, and its members were particularly renowned for their mastery of fire attribute cultivation arts. However, for some reason, its members very rarely left the sect, and they kept a rather low profile, so Tay's sect wasn't as renowned as it should have been. Su Yangzi gave Han Li a slight nod, then turned back to Taoist Hu Yan as he asked, "Isn't it a little premature to be discussing what happens after we enter the immortal manor when we don't even know where the entrance is right now, fellow Taoist Gu?" As for the two elders, Zhen Yun and Lu Lan, both of them merely took a glance at Han Li before looking away. Han Li wasn't bothered by this, and he made his way over to Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai before standing behind them. "I'm sure the three of you must have already heard about that piece of news that was released in the Transient Guild. Perhaps the entrance of the Immortal Manor may not actually be there, but at the very least, we have a lead to pursue," Taoist Hu Yan replied with a faint smile. "It's a great sign of trust that you approached us with the Infernal Frost scenic painting and offered to let us accompany you into the Immortal Manor. For that, we should be extremely grateful, but at this point, we've already searched through the entire Black Wind Sea without being able to find any leads, and there's no evidence to back up this piece of news, so I'm afraid I'm not very optimistic about its validity. While it's true that this piece of news is unsubstantiated up to this point, regardless of whether it's true or not, we should still go and take a look on Red Moon Island," Yun Nai said. "Pardon me for being blunt, but just like you said, no one knows if this piece of news is true or not, and there's a chance that someone intentionally spread this rumor and set up a trap on Red Moon Island for people to fall into. If that's the case, then we'd be making a grave error by going to the island," Zhen Yun said with a shake of his head. Lu Lan's brows were tightly furrowed as she chimed in, "Exactly. There's a chance that this could be a trap set by none other than the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, so it's best to proceed with caution. The Infernal Frost Immortal Manor only emerges once every several tens of thousands of years, and in particular, someone discovered an entirely new area within it last time. There's a very good chance that this area holds high zenith pills, which are immensely beneficial to anyone attempting to reach the high zenith stage. Otherwise, the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace wouldn't have gone to such great lengths to conceal the entrance. This is an opportunity that'll perhaps never come around again. Are you really willing to just back down like this?" Taoist Hu Yan asked as his brows furrowed slightly. Su Yangzi's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and he replied, "Well, I haven't made any concrete decisions yet. I'm just saying that we should proceed with caution and take our time to make a decision." Zhen Yun and Lu Lan didn't say anything further, but it was clear that they were still rather doubtful about the situation. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. These golden immortals from the True Flame sect were clearly tempted by the allure of the treasures in the Immortal Manor, but they weren't displaying any courage or decisiveness in this situation. If this was the personality of their sect master and elders, then it was no wonder that the sect had always kept such a low profile. "I understand that you're concerned about the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace. It's true that if we run into them in the Immortal Palace, we'll be no match for them. However, ever since the Blaze Dragon Dao incident, there's been a great deal of discontent building against the Immortal Palace. According to my knowledge, many powers, including the Vast Flow Palace and the Dawnfall sect, have been very displeased with the Immortal Palace's handling of the Blaze Dragon Dao situation, and in particular, their concealment of the Immortal Manor's entrance. Essentially, they've made themselves public enemy number one, and I predict that all of those powers will definitely be sending people to Red Moon Island," Taoist Hu Yan said. "If the entrance of the Immortal Manor really is below Red Moon Island, with everyone joining forces against the Immortal Palace, there's no way they'll be able to contend with all of us. Even if this is a trap, it'll be impossible for them to trap us all, so what do we have to fear?" Yun Nai added. "What you're saying does make a lot of sense," Su Yangzi mused as he stroked his own beard, seemingly tempted by what he was hearing, and the same applied to Zhen Yun and Lu Lan as well. even if they were to disregard the rumor that there were high zenith pills in the Immortal manor. All of the other precious treasures inside were already extremely alluring to them. We don't have much time left, so you'll have to make a decision fast, fellow Taoists. Are you really willing to just let this opportunity slip through your fingers? Taoist Hu Yan asked. A slightly conflicted look appeared in Su Yangzi's eyes. Of course, we can't just go there recklessly. Instead, we have to establish a plan in advance, Taoist Hu Yan continued. Han Li took a glance at the True Flame sect cultivators, then smiled as he asked, I'm sure you already have a plan prepared, right, Martial Uncle? Taoist Hu Yan merely smiled in response, then swept a sleeve through the air to remove the surrounding restriction. After that, a ball of blue light flew out of his sleeve, then transformed into a blue flying carriage with a rather peculiar appearance. There was a cross-shaped windmill on both the front and the back of the carriage, and it was radiating dazzling light while also giving off formidable spiritual power fluctuations. This carriage is something that I obtained from the Infernal Frost Immortal manor many years ago, and it has an exceptional concealment effect, so we should be a lot safer if we take this carriage to Red Moon Island, Taoist Hu Yan said. Han Li examined the carriage closely to find that it was refined from some special spirit materials, and there were countless complex and profound spirit patterns engraved onto its surface, giving off faint water law fluctuations. Thanks to his heavy water true axis, he was quite sensitive to water law fluctuations, and he could sense that the law fluctuations emanating from the carriage were more geared toward concealment. Han Li decided to lead by example, flying onto the carriage before everyone else, while Su Yangzi hesitated for a while longer before also doing the same. The two elders and the other 6 true immortal cultivators of the True Flame sect quickly followed suit, flying onto the carriage as well. Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai exchanged a smile before also flying onto the carriage. After landing on the carriage, Taoist Hu Yan made a hand seal, and a burst of misty blue light emerged to envelop the entire carriage, instantly concealing both its physical form and its aura, making it completely undetectable. Immediately thereafter, the flying carriage descended into the sea down below at Taoist Hu Yan's behest. Upon entering the sea, the blue light emanating from the carriage instantly completely fused as one with the surrounding seawater, and it was as if the carriage had become a part of the sea. The carriage then shot forth through the water as a streak of light, while Su Yangzi praised, "This flying carriage of yours is indeed extremely profound, fellow Taoist Gu. It looks like the Infernal Frost Immortal manor really does contain some exceptional treasures." "You're far too kind, fellow Taoist. If we can enter the Immortal manor, I'm sure all of you will be able to reap some exceptional spoils," Taoist Hu Yan replied with a smile. "I'm looking forward to it," Elder Zhen Yun said with a smile. "Hopefully, the entrance of the Immortal manor really is beneath Red Moon Island, and we manage to enter the Immortal manor without any incident," Lu Lan said. A faint smile appeared on Taoist Hu Yan's face, and he didn't speak any further as he gently stomped a foot down onto the flying carriage, upon which it accelerated even further. The carriage was traveling rapidly through the water in a wraith-like manner, and it wasn't causing any physical disturbance or displacement of water. The fish and the demon beasts in the sea continued to swim around and forage for food, completely oblivious to the carriage's passing. Han Li was inspecting his surroundings, and he was also quite impressed with the carriage. The craftsmanship of this carriage was exceptional, and the person who had refined it clearly had outstanding mastery over the laws of water as well, so it was indeed very safe taking this carriage through the sea. However, judging from the immortal spiritual power fluctuations that it was giving off, it was most likely quite taxing on immortal origin stones as well. It seemed that Taoist Hu Yan was making an investment here so that the True Flame sect cultivators would be willing to accompany them. Han Li looked around momentarily before sitting down with his legs crossed in a corner of the carriage, then closed his eyes to meditate. As for the other true immortals of the True Flame sect, all of them also did the same after the excitement and novelty of the carriage wore off. See, Fig Island wasn't far away from Red Moon Island, and this carriage was extremely fast, so it only took them around 2 days to arrive at their destination. Instead of directly reaching the island, the carriage stopped in the sea several hundred kilometers away. Everyone on the carriage had already risen to their feet, and they were observing the enormous island up ahead in silence. I didn't think this island would be so massive. Even if that rumor is true, it won't be easy to find the entrance of the Immortal Manor on such a huge island, Taoist Hu Yan said as his brows furrowed slightly. The infernal frost scenic painting wasn't going to help them in this situation, and in order to remain covert, they couldn't use their spiritual sense to search for the entrance either. Given those circumstances, searching such a huge island was indeed going to be quite a difficult task. Su Yangzi and the others were all looking at one another, and it was clear that they were also at a loss for how to proceed. Let's go around the island and search its border. Perhaps we'll be able to make some discoveries, Yun Nai suggested. I suppose that's better than nothing. Taoist Hu Yan couldn't think of any better strategies, so he decided to adopt this idea, and the carriage set off once again at his behest. Meanwhile, everyone was using their own covert abilities to scour the surrounding area. 2 beams of blue light that were several feet in length emerged from Han Li's eyes as he inspected his surroundings, and Su Yangzi's brows instantly furrowed slightly upon seeing this. Don't use your abilities recklessly. If you expose us, we'll all be in grave danger. Besides, with your paltry cultivation base, it's not like you'll be able to contribute anything anyway. I understand your concerns, Senior Su Yangzi, but this is a spirit eye ability of mine that doesn't give off any aura, so you can rest assured, Han Li replied with a smile. Don't worry, fellow Taoist Su Yangzi. If Tianyu wants to help, then why don't we give him the opportunity? Taoist Hu Yan said with a smile. Su Yangzi didn't say anything further upon hearing this, and Taoist Hu Yan gave Han Li a slight nod, indicating for him to continue. With the speed of the blue flying carriage, they were quickly able to make it halfway around Red Moon Island, but no one had discovered anything. Su Yangzi's expression had darkened once again, and Zhen Yun and Lu Lan were also beginning to look rather uneasy. Right at this moment, Han Li's expression changed slightly as he hurriedly said, "Please stop here for a moment, Martial Uncle." Taoist Hu Yan raised an eyebrow upon hearing this, and the flying carriage instantly drew to a halt at his behest. At the same time, a layer of rippling blue light appeared over its surface, and it was once again indistinguishable from the seawater around it. Mere moments later, a streak of light shot forth from afar from the left, then continued toward the seabed without pause, vanishing out of sight in the blink of an eye. That spirit eye ability of yours is quite impressive, Tianyu, Taoist Hu Yan praised. You're far too kind, Martial Uncle. I was only lucky to have been looking in the right direction, Han Li replied in a humble manner. Su Yangzi's eyelid twitched slightly, clearly feeling a little embarrassed to have been proven wrong like this, but he still cast his gaze toward the streak of light like everyone else. Perhaps the entrance is down there. Tianyu, can you see a little further? Yun Nai asked. Han Li took a deep breath as he channeled his bright-sight spirit eyes with all his might, but unfortunately, the sea here was too deep for him to see the bottom, and he could only turn to Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai with a resigned shake of his head. We've already come here, so some degree of risk is unavoidable. I think we should go down and have a look, Taoist Hu Yan suggested after some contemplation. Yun Nai nodded in agreement, and Han Li naturally offered no objections either. What do you think, fellow Taoist Su Yangzi? Taoist Hu Yan asked as he turned to Su Yangzi's trio. The three of them exchanged a glance, following which Su Yangzi also nodded in agreement with this proposed course of action. With that, Taoist Huyan made a hand seal, and the blue flying carriage swiveled around before descending toward the seabed. The sea here was extremely deep, and even after flying for a long while, the flying carriage still hadn't reached the seabed. Furthermore, there were countless deep rifts and trenches on the seabed here, presenting a very complex terrain that resembled a mountain range. A hesitant look appeared on Taoist Hu Yan's face, and he was no longer able to sense where the streak of light had gone. He exchanged a glance with Yun Nai, in response to which she gave a shake of her head. He then turned to Su Yangzi's trio with an inquisitive expression, but it was clear that they were just as lost as he was. "He went down that trench, Marshal Uncle," Han Li said as he pointed at a giant trench not far away. An elated look immediately appeared on Taoist Hu Yan's face, and he asked, "What is this spirit eye ability of yours? How is it able to allow you to see so far?" At the same time, he was making a string of hand seals, and the blue flying carriage immediately flew toward the trench that Han Li was pointing at. "You think far too highly of me, Marshal Uncle. There's no way my spirit eyes can see that far. It's just that the ability allows me to see spiritual power fluctuations, and I was able to see some of the traces that person left behind," Han Li explained with a smile. At his current cultivation base, he was able to see faint spiritual power traces, even without combining his bright sight spirit eyes with his law destruction eye. "Even so, it's quite remarkable that your spirit eye ability was able to detect such faint spiritual power traces," Yun Nai praised. Su Yangzi's trio was also forced to reevaluate Han Li upon hearing this, and Han Li merely gave them a modest smile in response. At this point, the flying carriage had already flown deep into the trench. The terrain here was also extremely complex, without countless tunnels and passageways that led to unknown places. These passageways seemed to have been formed naturally, but it was unclear how they had arisen. A peculiar look appeared in Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. During the Gong Shuheng assassination mission, he had remained on the island the entire time, so he was unaware of the complexities present beneath the island. Han Li continued to work with Taoist Hu Yan, with the former using his spirit eye ability to follow the spiritual power traces, while the latter controlled the flying carriage. Some places that they had to pass through were quite narrow, only several feet wide, but the carriage was able to expand or shrink at will, and all of the cultivators on board were also able to manipulate their own bodies through various means, so this was no obstacle for them. Close to an hour passed by in the blink of an eye, and the blue flying carriage continued to traverse slowly through the water. The rock tunnels on the seabed were blue in color, resembling ice crystals, and they were giving off wisps of spiritual qi, indicating that they were similar in constitution to some spirit materials. It was extremely dark this deep in the sea, and the only source of light came from the faint blue radiance emanating from the rock tunnels. Han Li continued to inspect his surroundings with his bright sight spirit eyes, and at this point, he could detect many spiritual power traces, as if many people had come here before. He immediately revealed this observation to Taoist Hu Yan and the others, and everyone was elated to hear this. The fact that so many people had recently passed through this area indicated there was a very good chance that the entrance of the Immortal Manor was up ahead. Taoist Hu Yan remained patient as he continued to slowly advance the flying carriage through the water, and after traveling for a while longer, bursts of rumbling suddenly began to ring out up ahead, as if there were a battle taking place. Everyone was even more encouraged upon seeing this. It should be just up ahead. Looks like that piece of news was true, after all. Don't let your guard down, everyone. We still can't be sure yet, so let's not get complacent, Taoist Hu Yan cautioned as he made a hand seal, and the flying carriage accelerated slightly. As the flying carriage continued onward, the rumbling up ahead grew louder and louder, and all of the nearby seawater was also churning incessantly. At the same time, the rock tunnels were beginning to tremble, and chunks of rocks of different sizes were occasionally clattering down from above. Lights of different colors were flashing through the space up ahead, and at the same time, bursts of spiritual sense were sweeping forth from all directions in a blatant fashion, making no attempt at subtlety and secrecy. This was certainly not something that Han Li and the others had expected to see. The flying carriage continued onward, reaching the end of the rock tunnel in the blink of an eye. Up ahead was an enormous underground cave, the roof of which was riddled with countless blue stalactites, and it seemed that this was a naturally forming karst cave that was several dozen kilometers in size. At this moment, there were also dozens of cultivators gathered in the cave, all of whom were viciously bombarding a certain part of the cave with attacks. They were collectively attacking a dense black light barrier, beyond which one could just barely make out the entrance of a cave. There were some cultivators standing deep within the opening of the cave, but it was impossible to see them clearly due to the black light barrier in the way. One spirit treasure after another crashed into the black light barrier, causing it to shudder incessantly, and it was unclear whether this cave had been artificially fortified or if it was this resilient to begin with, but it remained completely unscathed despite the powerful shockwaves released by the barrage of attacks. How dare you seal the entrance of the Immortal Manor? The infernal frost Immortal Manor doesn't belong to your northern glacial Immortal Palace. Remove these restrictions right now. Some of the cultivators were yelling to vent their fury as they continued to rain down attacks upon the black light barrier. Han Li and the others were ecstatic to see this, and Taoist Hu Yan flipped a hand over to produce the infernal frost scenic painting. As soon as the painting was summoned, the blue light radiating from it instantly brightened before pointing in the direction of the black light barrier. Due to the restrictions, it seemed that the painting was only able to detect the entrance of the Immortal Manor from very close proximity. It looks like the entrance of the Immortal Manor really is here, Taoist Hu Yan said as he stowed his infernal frost scenic painting away, then cast a fervent gaze toward the black light barrier, and Su Yangzi and the others were also looking very excited. Han Li was also quite elated, but not as much as the others, and he quickly calmed down before turning his attention to the other cultivators in the cave. There were 34 cultivators present, all of whom were at or above the true immortal stage. They were dressed in different attire and split up into 3 factions, the most eye-catching one of which was situated at the edge of the cave. The group consisted of around a dozen blue-robed cultivators, led by a benevolent-looking middle-aged man. This man was none other than the master of the vast Flow Palace, Luo Qinghai. As for the people standing beside Luo Qinghai, Han Li had no recollection of any of them aside from an effeminate young man. The vast Flow Palace cultivators were the most formidable faction of the 3, with 4 mid-golden immortal cultivators alongside Luo Qinghai, who was at the late golden immortal stage. In the face of such a formidable lineup, Han Li's group was completely outmatched. On top of that, the majority of the rest of the vast Flow Palace cultivators were at the late true immortal stage. After taking a brief glance at the vast Flow Palace cultivators, Han Li turned his attention to the other 2 factions, one of which was dressed in black robes, each of which had a skull design embroidered onto the chest. This group also consisted of around a dozen cultivators, led by an elderly man with pockmarks all over his face, a petite young woman whose features were concealed behind a veil, and 2 other men, one tall and one short. The pockmark-faced elderly man wore a vicious expression as he glowered his surroundings, while the veiled young woman's entire body was enveloped within rings of translucent azure light. As for the other 2 men, The taller one was over 20 feet in height and had an extremely imposing physique, giving him the appearance of an impregnable fortress on legs. The shorter of the two was less than 5 feet tall with stubby arms and legs that gave him a rather comical appearance, but he possessed an extremely solid physique, much like an iron weight. Despite the enormous disparity in the statures of the two men, their facial features were very similar in appearance, and it seemed that they were brothers. All four of them were golden immortals, with the pockmark-faced elderly man at the mid-golden immortal stage, while the other three were at the early golden immortal stage, and the rest of the group were naturally all true immortals. The final group had a similar number of people to the other two factions, and they were all dressed in very strange attire. Regardless of whether they were male or female, all of them were wearing short vests with black bandanas around their heads. Furthermore, it seemed that they were not of the human race. There were 4 golden immortals among them as well, namely an elderly man with a dark complexion, an elderly woman with freckled skin, and a pair of physically imposing men with blank and wooden expressions, as if they were puppets. The 4 of them were holding a golden cane each, all of which were riddled with peculiar golden patterns, while also giving off formidable auras that were resonating with one another. At this moment, the latter 2 factions in the cave were attacking the black light barrier, while the vast flow palace cultivators were merely observing as bystanders. Meanwhile, Luo Qinghai was occasionally glancing down into the underground space beneath the cave entrance, seemingly waiting for something. After their initial excitement, Taoist Hu Yan and the others gradually calmed down after assessing the situation. Su Yangzi hesitated momentarily, then asked in a quiet voice, "Should we reveal ourselves now or continue observing like this? Seeing as there aren't any traps here, I think we should reveal ourselves. Otherwise, if we're somehow discovered, that would put us in a bad light. Having said that, this is not the right place to be revealing ourselves," Taoist Hu Yan replied, following which the blue flying carriage beneath his feet flew back a little through the rock tunnel at his behest. Immediately thereafter, he made a hand seal, and the carriage rapidly shrank down before flying back up his sleeve, thereby revealing everyone. "Let's go." Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai led the way forward, and Su Yangzi and the others immediately followed along. As soon as they re-entered the cave, everyone's attention was immediately drawn to them, including several pairs of eyes in the underground space beneath the black light barrier. Luo Qinghai took a glance at Han Li's group, following which a hint of disappointment flashed through his eyes, and he quickly averted his gaze. The other 2 factions temporarily ceased in their attacks before turning to Han Li's group as well. Meanwhile, Taoist Hu Yan and the others feigned surprised expressions and stopped not far away from everyone else. The pockmark-faced man put on a hideous smile as he approached Han Li's group, and after taking a glance at Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai, he greeted, "I didn't expect to see you here, fellow Taoist Su Yangzi. Who are these 2 fellow Taoists? I don't recall ever meeting them before." As for Han Li, he was just a true immortal, so he naturally didn't attract much attention from the elderly man. All of the other black-robed cultivators also approached Han Li, and the others behind the pockmark-faced elderly man. "Long time no see, fellow Taoist Chen. These 2 are good friends of our true flame sect, and they've come to explore this infernal frost immortal manor with us. Fellow Taoist Gu, this is Sect Master Chen Pai of the Ghost Whale Sect," Su Yangzi introduced. Han Li raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. The Ghost Whale Sect was a sect on the ancient Cloud Continent that was comparable in power to the true Flame Sect. Its members were proficient in all types of ghostly and devilish cultivation arts, and they had a notorious reputation, often killing others to take their souls for the sake of cultivating certain ghostly abilities, and even going as far as to completely slaughter some smaller sects, for which they had always been frowned upon by the Blaze Dragon Dao. However, the sect was situated very far away from the Blaze Dragon Dao, so as long as they didn't do anything to harm the Blaze Dragon Dao's interests, there was naturally no incentive for the Blaze Dragon Dao to target them. I've heard much about the Ghost Whale sect. My name is Gu Yan, and this is my junior martial sister, Gu Nai. Both of us are itinerant cultivators, Taoist Hu Yan said with a smile, while Yun Nai merely nodded at the Ghost Whale sect cultivators in silence. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, fellow Taoists, Chen Pai said. He seemed to be eager to recruit Su Yangzi, Taoist Hu Yan, and the others as allies, and the feeling was very much mutual, so the two sides quickly struck up a pleasant conversation. As for the group of foreign race cultivators, they remained standing on the spot in silence, displaying no intention of approaching Han Li's group. Could it be that the entrance of the Immortal Manor is in there? Su Yangzi asked as he cast his gaze toward the cave beneath the black light barrier. That's right. The people from the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace are all in there, and they've set up a restriction to seal the entrance so that they can keep it to themselves. Other people may be scared of the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, but I'm certainly not scared. You came at just the right time, fellow Taoist Su Yangzi. Our three factions should work together to blow this restriction open and give the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace what they deserve, Chen Pai said with a cold smile. Three factions? Are you counting in those people over there? Taoist Hu Yan asked as he cast his gaze toward the foreign race cultivators. Precisely. They're cultivators of the Southern Dawn race from the westernmost border of the Northern Glacial Immortal region. They don't mean any disrespect. They simply don't like to interact with people outside of their own race, Chen Pai explained. Taoist Hu Yan wasn't bothered at all. All races were generally quite apprehensive toward those of other races. However, as long as there wasn't any animosity beyond that, Taoist Hu Yan certainly wasn't opposed to working with those Southern Dawn beings. Truth be told, I've already communicated with them earlier, and they're also very unhappy with what the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace has done here, so they'll definitely be receptive to the idea of forming a temporary alliance with us. The restriction set up by the Immortal Palace is very resilient, but if we can get 10 golden immortals attacking the same spot on it at once, we'll surely be able to break through it, Chen Pai said. Su Yangzi's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and he turned to Taoist Hu Yan for a verdict. A hint of surprise flashed through Chen Pai's eyes upon seeing this, and he was forced to reassess the status of Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai in the group. The vast Flow Palace cultivators are also here. Why haven't you joined forces with them to break this restriction? Taoist Hu Yan asked. They're a major sect that has no eyes for other sects and races beneath them, so they're naturally unwilling to work with us, Chen Pai replied with a resigned expression. Taoist Hu Yan was silent for a moment upon hearing this, then swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of gentle light that instantly formed a light barrier, encompassing the surrounding area within a radius of over 100 feet. After setting up the light barrier, Taoist Hu Yan said, "Sect Master Chen, in my opinion, it's best for us not to break this restriction for now." Chen Pai's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. "Oh, why do you say that, fellow Taoist Gu?" The Northern Glacial Immortal Palace's actions have already incurred widespread outrage from all of the powers that have gathered in the Black Wind Sea in search for the Immortal Manor. If our three factions join forces to break the restriction now, that'll be sure to pit us in a direct conflict against the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, and even if we can keep them at bay, we'll only be benefiting others, Taoist Hu Yan explained. A contemplative look appeared on Chen Pai's face upon hearing this. "I think that we should take a more patient approach. There's still some time until the opening of the Immortal Manor, and the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace cultivators won't be able to simultaneously enter the immortal manor while also defending the restriction here. The location of the immortal manor's entrance was leaked quite some time ago, so it's only a matter of time before all of the powers assemble. Once that happens, surely the immortal palace wouldn't dare to continue to oppose everyone, Taoist Huyan continued. Fellow Taoist Gu is right. This is not the right time to be breaking the restriction, and the vast flow palace cultivators are most likely hanging back precisely for this reason. They would be ecstatic to see us engage in a direct battle against the northern glacial immortal palace cultivators while they look on from the sidelines. Luo Qinghai is a sly old fox, and this is what he likes to do best, Su Yangzi chimed in with a nod. Chen Pai's eyes immediately lit up upon hearing this. That's a good plan, fellow Taoist Gu. It seems I was too eager to strike. I was so infuriated by the northern glacial immortal palace's actions that I was determined to foil their plans, even if it meant that I lost the chance to enter the immortal manor myself. But it appears there's no reason to make such a sacrifice. You're far too kind, fellow Taoist Chen, Taoist Huyan replied in a modest manner. Chen Pai and Taoist Huyan chatted for a while longer before the former departed and flew back to the group of Southern Dawn beings, where he began communicating with the 4 golden immortals. The pair of imposing men displayed no reaction to what they were being told, but the elderly man and the elderly woman's expressions changed slightly upon hearing what Chen Pai had to say. The two of them then nodded in agreement with Taoist Huyan's proposed course of action, and they refrained from continuing in their assault on the black light barrier. All of a sudden, it had become very peaceful in the cave. Luo Qinghai took a glance at Taoist Huyan as a peculiar look flashed through his eyes. It looks like someone with an ounce of intelligence has finally arrived, Palace Master, the fair-skinned scholar remarked as he approached Luo Qinghai. Even though Taoist Huyan had just set up a restriction to prevent others from eavesdropping on their conversation, it was very apparent what had just transpired. This is not a bad development. It may not necessarily benefit us for them to recklessly break the restriction, so let's just continue waiting and observing, Luo Qinghai said in a contemplative manner. Indeed, Palace Master, it would be best to wait for everyone to arrive and force Zhao Jinhen to remove the restriction, the fair-skinned scholar said. Luo Qinghai merely smiled in response. Behind the black light barrier was a cave, which led into a spacious area, one in which all of the northern glacial immortal palace cultivators were situated. At this point, the cultivators on the stone pillars had already stopped what they were doing and flown down from the pillars. However, the formation was still functioning to encompass the Gate of Light. Aside from them, there were also some cultivators dressed in Black Wind Island attire, including Lu Jun, Lu Yuking, and several of the Black Wind Island elders. At this moment, everyone was standing with their heads lowered, not daring to make even the slightest sound. Meanwhile, Zhao Jinhen was glowering at everyone with a furious expression, and there was a cloud of black mist swirling around his body, giving off a fearsome aura of malice. Who can explain to me what's happened here? How was the location of the immortal manor suddenly leaked without any explanation? Zhao Jinhen asked in a cold voice. None of the northern glacial, immortal palace cultivators could offer a response. Zhao Jinhen turned his gaze to Deputy Palace Master Zhu Wang. Zhu Wang hesitated momentarily, then said, "All of the people who are aware of the entrance's location are gathered here right now, and the restriction set up cuts off all communication with the outside world, so there shouldn't be any way for the information to have been leaked." Then why don't you explain to me how those people have shown up outside? Zhao Jinhen demanded as he turned to Zhu Wang with a sharp gaze. Zhu Wang's complexion instantly paled slightly, and she was at a loss for how to respond. This is the one task that I assign to all of you. Yet you've still managed to make a complete mess of things. Zhao Jinhen spat in a cold voice. After a tense silence, Lu Yue said in a feeble voice, I believe that there are only two possible explanations, Palace Master. Go ahead, Zhao Jinhen prompted. The first possibility is that one of us leaked this information, Lu Yue said. A cold gleam flashed through Zhao Jinhen's eyes upon hearing this. That's impossible. All of the cultivators of our northern glacial immortal palace that were sent here are absolutely loyal and trustworthy. On top of that, even golden immortals like you and I are unable to send any information to the outside world through the restrictions here. Zhu Wang immediately objected with furrowed brows. I'm also certain that everyone here is reliable and trustworthy. So there's only a very slim chance of this being the case, Lu Yue said. What's the other possibility? Zhao Jinhen asked. The second possible explanation is that the Reincarnation Palace already discovered the entrance of the Immortal Manor well in advance, and they were the ones who leaked this information, Lu Yue replied. Everyone's expressions changed slightly upon hearing this, while Zhao Jinhen's brows furrowed slightly in contemplation. The black mist swirling around his body slowly dissipated, and the menacing aura in the air also faded, much to the relief of everyone else. We've been able to lead the Reincarnation Palace on one wild goose chase after another, pursuing a series of false entrances, but now that I think about it, things may have gone a little smoothly. The Reincarnation Palace has been able to contend with our Immortal Palace for many years, so they shouldn't be this incapable. I think they must have already seen through our intentions, and they've only been pretending to fall for our ploys in order to lure us into a false sense of security, Lu Yue continued. Everyone immediately began to discuss this theory. Be quiet, Zhao Jinhen yelled, and everyone instantly fell silent again. Regardless of exactly what happened, there's no use in speculating now. Keep doing what you need to do, and I'll deal with the rest, Zhao Jinhen said in an indifferent voice, having calmed down again. With that, everyone returned to their original posts, including Yang Qiushan and the Dao Lords, who returned to the tops of their respective stone pillars. A few people also made their way over to the black restriction at the entrance of the cave, before sitting down with their legs crossed. Meanwhile, Zhao Jinhen cast his gaze outward with a cold look in his eyes, and it was unclear what he was contemplating. Meanwhile, the cave outside was completely silent. Han Li was observing everyone as he stood behind Taoist Hu Yan and Yun Nai. Worm 3's objective was also the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor, so perhaps they had already arrived here. However, it was impossible to tell as all of the Reincarnation Palace cultivators also had Transient Guild masks that could conceal their appearances and auras. He was inspecting everyone in the cave closely, trying to spot some telltale signs, but his efforts proved to be futile. Right at this moment, Han Li's expression suddenly changed slightly as he cast his gaze outside, and a hint of foreboding suddenly welled up in his heart. Taoist Hu Yan noticed the change in Han Li's expression, and he asked through voice transmission, "What is it?" "I think someone else is coming," Han Li replied. Taoist Hu Yan cast his gaze toward the entrance of the cave upon hearing this, just in time to see a silver-robed woman appear amid a flash of silver light. The woman took an expressionless glance at everyone else in the cave, then slowly made his way inside. Her arrival created a small stir among everyone in the cave, and even Luo Qinghai's eyes narrowed ever so slightly at the sight of her arrival. A hint of wariness flashed through Han Li's eyes as he observed the woman. Even with his tremendous spiritual sense, he was unable to detect her cultivation base, and he had only ever experienced this with Zhao Jinhen and Bailey Yan. Not even Luo Qinghai had been so unfathomable in his eyes. He observed the woman for a while longer, then closed his eyes to meditate. The woman was none other than Gling, and there was a small golden pouch hanging from her waist. The pouch was glowing with spiritual light, and there were several peculiar patterns on its surface, giving off a burst of law fluctuations. Right at this moment, the pouch twitched ever so slightly, and Gling's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this as she brushed a hand over the pouch in a subtle fashion. A ball of silver light appeared over the palm of her hand before quickly vanishing into the pouch, upon which it fell still again. All of a sudden, Han Li's eyes sprang open as a hint of shock flashed across his face, and he hurriedly lowered his head to conceal his expression. Right at this moment, Gling raised her head as she swept her gaze across everyone in the cave. At this moment, everyone was also observing her, and as soon as anyone's gaze met hers, they immediately felt a sharp pain in their eyes, as if they had been pricked by a needle. Most of the people present hurriedly withdrew their gaze, and some with lesser cultivation bases couldn't help but give muffled groans, as if they had suffered some internal injuries. Some of the golden immortals present were rather displeased to see this, but they didn't say anything. Luo Qinghai's brows furrowed slightly, and he said, "I wasn't expecting to see you here, fellow Taoist Gling." Just now, two of the vast flow palace's true immortals had suffered some internal injuries from their brief eye contact with Gling, and this was not good news for their imminent venture into the immortal manor. "You're constantly in seclusion, yet even you've come here, so why can't I be here?" Gling countered as she took an indifferent glance at Luo Qinghai. "The infernal frost immortal manor doesn't belong to our vast flow palace, so of course you're free to come here as you please, but isn't it rather unbefitting for someone of your status to be intimidating these juniors?" Luo Qinghai asked with a faint smile. "If you keep these juniors in check so that they don't go around gawking at others like idiots, perhaps I wouldn't have to discipline them in your stead," Gling replied with a cold sneer. The other golden immortals of the vast flow palace immediately flared up with rage, yet Luo Qinghai raised a hand to stop them before they could say anything. "You're right, fellow Taoist, these juniors were indeed at fault for being so rude. It seems like you've advanced even further in your cultivation since we last met. I must admit that I'm very impressed," Luo Qinghai said with a faint smile. Gling offered no response, taking a glance at the black restriction before finding a place to stand in the cave. Luo Qinghai was completely unbothered by this, and his smile remained unchanged as he averted his gaze in a calm manner. "Who is this woman, Senior Hu Yan? It seems like even Luo Qinghai doesn't dare to provoke her," Han Li inquired through voice transmission. "Her name is Gling, and she's quite an enigmatic figure, but she's also very renowned in this immortal region. She already reached the late golden immortal stage over 100,000 years ago, and it seems that her cultivation base has advanced even further since then," Taoist Hu Yan replied. Han Li's pupils contracted slightly upon hearing this. Despite her lofty cultivation base, what's actually most fearsome about her is the vast formation of spirit beasts and spirit insects in her possession. On top of that, she has a very cruel and unpredictable personality, and even the northern glacial immortal palace wouldn't want to make an enemy out of her. If you run into her in the immortal manor, then make sure to stay away, and do not provoke her no matter what you do, Taoist Hu Yan continued. "I'll be sure to keep that in mind," Han Li replied. Half a day passed by in the blink of an eye, and some of the people in the hall were beginning to grow rather agitated again, particularly the cultivators of the ghost whale sect. Chen Pai's gaze was flashing back and forth between the entrance of the cave and the black light barrier, and right at this moment, an ecstatic look appeared on Chen Pai's faces as another group of cultivators arrived. They were none other than the cultivators of the Dawnfall sect, led by their sect master in Feng Tiandu. "Welcome, Elder Feng, sect master Qi. I've already been waiting here for you for quite some time," Luo Qinghai greeted with a warm smile. You arrived quite early, Palace Luo, and you've brought with you quite a formidable entourage. It looks like you're determined to get your hands on some precious treasures in the infernal frost immortal manor, the Dawnfall sect master remarked. I wouldn't even dare to consider competing against the two of you. I've only brought these juniors with me on this occasion to broaden their horizons, so rest assured, you won't be facing any competition from me, Luo Qinghai replied with a smile. You're still as modest as ever, Palace Master Luo, the Dawnfall sect master chuckled, clearly completely unconvinced by Luo Qinghai's words. Meanwhile, Feng Tiandu remained silent as he swept his gaze across everyone else in the hall. He had changed into a clean gray robe, and he was still zombie-like in appearance, but he already appeared far more normal than before, and the chains around his body had also disappeared. All of a sudden, his gaze fell upon none other than Gling. Long time no see, fellow Taoist, Feng Tiandu said with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Gling merely nodded in response. Han Li was quite taken aback to see this. Gling had displayed a great deal of arrogance to everyone else in the cave, including even Luo Qinghai, yet she was far more restrained in the face of Feng Tiandu. Having said that, it seemed that this was for good reason, as Feng Tiandu's cultivation base felt just as unfathomable as Gling's to Han Li. Senior Hu Yan, are these people from the Dawnfall sect? Han Li asked through voice transmission. That's right. The man with the scar on his face is the sect master, Qi Tianxiao. He's always kept a low profile, so he's not all that renowned. The one standing beside him is Feng Tiandu, the grand elder of the Dawnfall sect, and he's a much more renowned figure in our northern glacial immortal region. Feng Tiandu, Dao Lord Bailey, and Zhao Jinhen are considered to be the three most formidable golden immortals of our northern glacial immortal region. But for some reason, he went into seclusion tens of thousands of years ago and hasn't come out since then. But it seems that he's finally come out of seclusion for this occasion, Taoist Hu Yan replied. Han Li's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this. He was carefully observing Feng Tiandu, and for some reason, he felt a sense of familiarity in Feng Tiandu, as if he had seen him somewhere before. Right at this moment, Feng Tiandu seemed to have sensed Han Li's gaze, and he turned to look at Han Li. Their eyes met, and Han Li instantly felt a chill run down his spine. He felt as if Feng Tiandu were seeing right through him, laying him completely bare and exposed. Han Li hurriedly averted his gaze, while Feng Tiandu observed Han Li for a while longer with a peculiar look in his eyes before also looking away, turning his attention to the black restriction in the cave. Are the northern glacial immortal palace cultivators in their right now, Palace Master Luo? Feng Tiandu asked. That's right, Luo Qinghai replied with a nod. Feng Tiandu observed the black light barrier for a moment, then raised a hand, and a streak of black light shot out of the palm of his hand like an arrow before striking the black light barrier in a flash. The streak of light wasn't remarkable in appearance at all, and it wasn't even all that bright, but the impact caused the black light barrier to shudder violently, sending ripples surging over its surface. Countless specks of black light appeared on the light barrier to form a 9-grid formation, and a burst of peculiar force emerged, quickly settling the ripples on the light barrier. This is the 9 Heavens Profound formation. Looks like Zhao Jinhen is indeed responsible for this, Feng Tiandu remarked as he turned to Luo Qinghai. Indeed, Elder Feng, Luo Qinghai replied with a smile. This restriction is certainly not easy to break, but given the combined powers of yourself and the other elders of your vast flow palace, you're definitely capable of breaking this restriction. So why have you still not done so, Palace Master Luo? Feng Tiandu asked. You think far too highly of me, Elder Feng. Besides, seeing as all of us want to enter the immortal manor, we should all contribute our efforts to breaking the restriction, Luo Qinghai replied with a smile. I suppose you're right, Palace Master Luo. What do you think, fellow Taoist? Feng Tiandu asked as he turned to Gling, in response to which she only gave a silent nod. All right, in that case, let's not waste any more time with idle chatter. Everyone, let's all join forces for now and force the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace to remove the restriction so we can all enter the Immortal Manor. After that, we all go our separate ways. What do you all say? Feng Tiandu declared as he swept his gaze over everyone else in the cave. Everyone immediately expressed their agreement to this proposal, and with that, Feng Tiandu rose up into the air before descending in front of the black restriction. All of the other Dawnfall sect cultivators hurriedly followed along, as did the cultivators from the other powers gathered in the cave. Han Li was naturally among them, but he intentionally lagged behind a little, situating himself in a discreet corner near the back of the crowd. An immense collective aura was emanating out of everyone's bodies, placing tremendous pressure upon the black restriction. The very space was trembling in the wake of the enormous spiritual pressure, and even the entire cave was beginning to rumble. The black restriction was rippling incessantly as Feng Tiandu declared in a cold voice, Zio Jinhen, your plan to keep the immortal manor to yourself has been foiled. Remove this restriction right now. Otherwise, we certainly wouldn't mind doing so by force. The black restriction continued to ripple, but remained in place. Fellow Taoists, it seems that the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace is determined to defy us to the end, so there's no need for us to hold back any longer. Let's combine our powers and break this restriction by force, Qi Tianxiao declared in a cold voice. Everyone in the cave had been frantically searching for the entrance of the Immortal Manor over the past few years, and as a result, they had developed a great deal of resentment toward the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace. Hence, they were more than happy to heed Qi Tianxiao's rallying call. Are we just going to leave it at that, fellow Taoists? The Immortal Palace needs to suffer the consequences for what they've done. Not only are we going to break this restriction, we should kick them out of here and relegate them to the fate of not being able to enter the Immortal Manor, just like what they tried to inflict upon us. Chen Pai yelled. Everyone immediately fell silent upon hearing this, while contemplative looks appeared on the faces of all of the most formidable golden immortals present. Generally, everyone tried to get along with the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, and it was often referred to as the leading power of the Northern Glacial Immortal region. But that was only due to how formidable the Immortal Palace was, and the fact that there were generally no conflicts of interest between the Immortal Palace and other sects. However, the Immortal Palace had put its ambition on full display in the wake of the Blaze Dragon Dao incident, and their sealing of the Immortal Manor entrance was a move that encroached upon the rights of everyone, so it was no wonder that they had become widely condemned. Luo Qinghai, Feng Tiandu, and all of the other golden immortals were clearly moved by the idea. They didn't know how many people the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace had sent to the Black Wind Sea, but there was no way that they would be a match for all of these formidable powers combined, so kicking the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace out was certainly a possibility. Luo Qinghai and Feng Tiandu exchanged a glance with one another, and right as they were about to say something, the black restriction suddenly began to ripple and quiver. Immediately thereafter, the 9 grids reappeared on its surface one after another, while the ripples became more and more pronounced. A few moments later, all of the 9 grids abruptly lit up with dazzling radiance, but the light faded just as abruptly as it appeared, following which the entire black restriction was also lifted, revealing the dim cave beyond. Everyone was already prepared to lash out, but all of a sudden, it was as if they had punched into a wall of cotton, and they began to exchange bewildered glances at one another, at a slight loss for what to do. Immediately thereafter, a voice rang out from within the cave. Come in, fellow Taoists. Having seen Xiao Jinhen in person back in the Blaze Dragon Dao, Han Li could tell that this was Xiao Jinhen's voice. Luo Qinghai, Feng Tiandu, and the other prominent golden immortals present exchanged a few glances, then made their way into the cave. Even Gling decided to follow behind Luo Qinghai, and the others after a brief moment of contemplation. All of the true immortals present immediately followed along, and that naturally included Han Li, who was trailing along behind Taoist Hu Yan. Before long, everyone had entered the cave. Not only had the black restriction at the entrance of the cave been lifted, the entire formation around the blue gate of light had also disappeared, but the 9 stone pillars were still standing. Without the seal in place, the blue light radiating from the gate had become several times brighter than before, and it was also giving off a glacial aura interspersed with formidable bursts of spatial power. The glacial aura and the spatial power intertwined, while the blue light within the gate surged violently, looking as if it were about to erupt out of the gate altogether. At the same time, the world's origin chi above Red Moon Island was also churning violently, forming a series of balls of dazzling radiance before exploding amid bursts of dull rumbling. The northern glacial Immortal Palace cultivators were situated near the Gate of Light, observing the cultivators making their way into the cave, and they were led by Xiao Jinhen, who was standing with a warm smile on his face, as if he were a hospitable host welcoming his guests. Han Li was standing in an obscure corner, and after a quick count, he discovered that there were around 2 or 3 dozen northern glacial Immortal Palace cultivators present, close to half of whom were golden immortals. What was rather surprising to him was the 3 Dao Lords, including Aoyang Qiushan, were also present. As for the rest of the Immortal Palace cultivators, they were either at the late true immortal stage or at the pinnacle of the true immortal stage. The northern glacial immortal region was clearly far more formidable than any single other power present, and it was certainly worthy of its title as the premier power of the northern glacial immortal region. However, with so many power joining forces, the collective lineup of cultivators was significantly more formidable than that of the northern glacial Immortal Palace. All of a sudden, Han Li noticed a group of black-robed figures standing beside the northern glacial Immortal Palace cultivators, among which were Lu Jun and Lu Yuking. He hurriedly ducked behind a physically imposing man, standing in front of him upon seeing this. The disguise that he had adopted using his Transient Guild mask could fool others, but Lu Yuking had shown that she was able to identify him through her innate ocular ability. "Please pardon our intrusion, Palace Master Xiao," Qi Tianxiao said with a hint of a mocking sneer on his face. Meanwhile, Feng Tiandu, Gling, Luo Qinghai, and the others were all scrutinizing Xiao Jinhen in silence. "It's so good to see so many of my old friends here. My sincerest apologies for not coming out to greet you sooner," Xiao Jinhen said with a faint smile. Feng Tiandu clearly wasn't in the mood for small talk, and he said in a cold voice, "Let's not waste any time here, Palace Master Xiao. I'm sure you heard the discussion that we had outside, right? I take responsibility for all of my actions, so all of you can do anything that you please. Our northern glacial Immortal Palace is fully prepared to bear the consequences," Xiao Jinhen replied in a calm manner. Meanwhile, all of the northern glacial Immortal Palace cultivators had placed their hand on their storage tools, and they weren't displaying any fear at all. "Do you think that we wouldn't dare to go through with our plan, Palace Master Xiao?" Gling asked as a cold gleam appeared in her eyes. "Your combined powers do indeed exceed that of our northern glacial Immortal Palace, but I suggest you think before you act. These stone pillars form a formation that can be detonated at any that I please. The resulting explosion won't be able to destroy the entrance, but it'll certainly be sufficiently powerful to destroy the space near the entrance. As for what'll happen to the entrance itself, you're free to speculate on that, Xiao Jinhin said in an indifferent voice. Gling's expression darkened slightly upon hearing this, and everyone else also became rather hesitant about how to proceed. Before anyone had a chance to say anything, Qi Tianxiao yelled, "You think an empty threat like that is enough to stop us? If you don't believe me, then you're free to give it a try," Xiao Jinhin replied in a calm and composed manner. Meanwhile, Feng Tiandu and the others were communicating to one another through voice transmission. "Fellow Taoist Feng, you're one of the top formation masters of our northern glacial immortal region. Can you tell if those stone pillars really are capable of doing what he claims?" Luo Qinghai asked. "Even I don't recognize all of the runes on these pillars, but my experience tells me that this is indeed an extremely formidable formation, and if it were to be detonated, the consequences would be catastrophic," Feng Tiandu replied. "What a sly bastard that Xiao Jinhin is. Are we just going to let them off the hook?" Qi Tianxiao asked in a disgruntled voice. "It'll take a very long time to unravel this restriction, and if a battle breaks out, we definitely won't be able to prevent him from detonating those stone pillars. Our top priority is to enter the Immortal Palace, so it looks like we have no choice but to adopt a more peaceful approach. Let's see what he says first," Feng Tiandu said. Luo Qinghai, Qi Tianxiao, Gling, and the others were silent for a moment, then nodded in agreement. "You've gotten the better of us this time, Palace Master Xiao. We'll settle for a peaceful resolution," Feng Tianxiao said. None of the other golden immortals said anything, but it was clear that Feng Tiandu had the authority to speak on their behalf. Gling began to make her way off to the side, and all of the true immortals gathered in that direction hurriedly dispersed to give her a wide berth. The other powers were feeling rather indignant, but seeing as the vast Flow Palace and the Dawnfall sect had already given up on pursuing this matter, they naturally weren't so foolish as to oppose the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace on their own. Even Chen Pai and the group of Southern Dawn beings had fallen silent at this point. A subtle hint of relief flashed through Xiao Jinhin's eyes upon seeing this, and he said with a faint smile, "The Infernal Frost Immortal Manor is enormous and filled with countless treasures. Even though it's emerged many times in the past, the treasures in it still show no signs of running out. All of us have come here for the Immortal Manor, so why ruin the peace with a pointless conflict? You've been here for the longest out of all of us. When do you think the Immortal Manor will descend, Palace Master Xiao?" Feng Tiandu asked. "It'll definitely descend in 2 more days at most, however." "What is it?" Feng Tiandu asked. "In order to reassure everyone, I've already withdrawn the restrictions at the entrance of the cave, but it would be best to keep the entrance of the Immortal Manor somewhat sealed. Otherwise, we'll be faced with a difficult predicament if the profound glacial qi within erupts outward," Xiao Jinhin replied. As soon as his voice trailed off, the blue light within the gate abruptly began to churn and rumble, following which a thick pillar of blue light erupted out from within, rising up directly toward the heavens. The air temperature in the entire cave instantly plummeted drastically, and a layer of blue ice crystals quickly spread over the entire area. Everyone hurriedly conjured up layers of protective spiritual light upon seeing this, while flying away from the gate of light as quickly as they could, and the ice crystals spreading over the cave were also promptly shattered under everyone's collective efforts. However, the glacial qi within the pillar of light was so formidable that some of the weaker true immortal cultivators present still suffered some internal injuries from the infiltration of glacial qi into their bodies. All of the golden immortals present hurriedly unleashed secret techniques or released spirit treasures to protect their entourages, and the entire cave erupted into a chaotic frenzy. The pillar of blue light continued to erupt outward for close to 20 seconds before slowly fading, and only then did the disturbance in the gate of light subside. It seems like the entrance really does need to be somewhat sealed. I think each of the powers present should send out a representative and have them join forces to seal the entrance. That way, everyone can rest assured that there won't be any foul play afoot, Feng Tiandu suggested. I concur, Luo Qinghai immediately chimed in. No one else raised any objections to this proposal, and each of the factions sent out a golden immortal representative, with the exception of Gling, who was on her own. Han Li's faction sent out Su Yangzi, and in total, there were 6 golden immortals surrounding the blue gate of light as they chanted an incantation while hovering in midair. Lights of different colors erupted out of their bodies, then intertwined to form a rainbow-like cage of light that encompassed the blue gate. The light on the surface of the gate instantly began to shudder erratically while releasing shockwaves that were invisible to the naked eye in all directions. The cage of light still hadn't fully taken shape yet, and it began to tremble violently in the face of the shockwaves, looking as if it could shatter at any moment. However, it was ultimately stabilized as everyone sped up their incantation. But a burst of residual shockwaves was still able to sneak through before spreading outward in all directions. The weaker true immortals in the cave were unable to stand their ground in the face of these shockwaves, and they were forced all the way back to the cave wall before finally steadying themselves. As a result, the originally orderly formation of cultivators in the cave had become a little chaotic. Han Li was able to withstand the shockwaves, but in order to blend in and not draw any attention to himself, he pretended to stumble back to the cave wall as well. From there, he observed the 6 golden immortals around the Gate of Light, and a thought suddenly sprang into his mind. According to Taoist Hu Yan, there were a total of 8 infernal frost scenic paintings, yet there were only 7 powers present, so was there one missing. All of the golden immortals present were sly old foxes who had lived for countless years, so there was no way that they hadn't noticed this. Hence, they must have simply refrained from mentioning this matter for some reason. While Han Li was deep in thought, a familiar voice rang out beside him. "Brother Liu." Han Li was immediately snapped out of his train of thought, and he turned to discover none other than Lu Yuking standing not far away from him, sneaking glances at him with a hint of a smile in her eyes. It seemed that, in the wake of the orderly formation of cultivators being broken up by that burst of shockwaves, Lu Yuking had taken the opportunity to sneak over to his side. A resigned look appeared on Han Li's face as he sighed through voice transmission. "I should have known I wouldn't be able to hide from you. I wasn't expecting to see you here, Brother Liu. Are you also interested in the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor?" Lu Yuking asked. "Of course I am, given the abundance of precious treasures in the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor. However, we belong to different factions at the moment. It looks like Black Wind Island is currently a subsidiary power to the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, so surely it's inappropriate for you to be approaching me like this," Han Li replied. "It's fine, Brother Liu. We've only been brought here to prevent us from leaking the location of the Immortal Manor's entrance. Now that the news has already been leaked, our presence here is completely superfluous. On top of that, the situation is a bit chaotic right now, so no one will be paying any attention to us," Lu Yuking said. Han Li offered no response to this. Lu Yuking hesitated momentarily, then continued, "Brother Liu, there's something I wanted to ask you. Time is of the essence, so I'll keep things brief." Han Li was rather taken aback to hear this, but his expression remained unchanged as he prompted, "Go ahead." "I also want to enter the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor, and I'm hoping that the faction that you belong to can bring me along," Lu Yuking declared in a direct and straightforward manner. Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing this, then asked, "Isn't your Black Wind Island a subsidiary power of the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace? Why don't you ask them to take you with them? Are you not aware that each Infernal Frost scenic painting can only grant 12 people access into the Immortal Manor? With such a limited number of spots, there's no way that the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace would be willing to take me with them," Lu Yuking said in a slightly self-deprecating voice. "I was indeed unaware of that," Han Li replied. Having said that, prior to this, he had already noticed that all of each of the factions present seemed to have consisted of 12 people, but he hadn't thought much of this as there had been other things on his mind. "You and I are acquaintances, and I really want to help you, but as you can see, all 12 of our spots are already occupied, so I'm afraid I won't be able to help you," Han Li replied. He was already taking quite a significant risk on this trip, and after seeing so many golden immortals here, he was even more determined to keep a low profile. He had decided that he was just going to play it safe and help Taoist Hu Yan obtain what he wanted in exchange for the next 3 levels of the Mantra Axis scripture. Han Li was confident that he would be able to secure a spot from Taoist Hu Yan, but in doing so, he would have to offend the true flame sect, and that was not a desirable outcome for him. "Don't be in such a hurry to refuse, Brother Liu. I can be more of a valuable asset than you think. Our Liu clan actually discovered the entrance of the Immortal Manor even earlier than the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, and at the time, we obtained a stone plaque from here that contains a part of the Immortal Manor's map and some other information. As I'm sure you're aware, the Immortal Palace is fraught with peril. If you bring me along, I'm willing to share my knowledge with you," Lu Yuking said. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up slightly upon hearing this. They were venturing into the Immortal Manor completely blind, so it would indeed be a lot safer if Lu Yuking could act as a guide for them. Han Li was silent for a moment, then asked, "Are you telling the truth?" "I'm willing to swear a vow. If I'm lying to you here, then let me be racked with inner demons and suffer a terrible death," Lu Yuking vowed in a solemn voice. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li nodded in response. "All right, in that case, I can relay your request to the leader of our group, but I can't guarantee whether he'll agree or not." "I knew I could count on you, Brother Liu," Lu Yuking said with a faint smile, seemingly completely unconcerned. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, but he still approached Taoist Hu Yan before relaying what Lu Yuking had told him through voice transmission. An ecstatic look instantly appeared in Taoist Hu Yan's eyes after he heard what Han Li had to say. "What? She has a map of the Immortal Manor. I've met her on several past occasions, so I know her decently well and I think she's telling the truth," Han Li replied. Taoist Hu Yan was silent for a moment, then nodded in response. "In that case, let's bring her along." "What about the true flame sect?" Han Li asked in a hesitant voice. "Leave them to me," Taoist Hu Yan replied. Han Li nodded in response, then turned to Lu Yuking and informed her of what had just transpired through voice transmission. An elated look appeared in Lu Yuking's eyes, and she gave Han Li a slight nod from afar before returning to the group of Black Wind Island cultivators. At this point, the restriction set up by the 6 golden immortals around the Gate of Light had already been fully established, and a thick rainbow light barrier had appeared over the blue gate. Glacial chi was surging violently within the Gate of Light, but the light barrier remained firm and resolute, standing against the waves of glacial chi without any trouble. It seemed that his restriction was even more formidable than the one that the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace had set up here earlier. As expected of a master of formations like yourself, fellow Taoist Feng, this restriction of yours is quite profound, Zhao Jinhin praised as he cupped his fist in a salute. "You're far too kind, Palace Master Zhao," Feng Tiandu replied in an indifferent voice, then sat down with his legs crossed somewhere in the cave. All of the other Dawnfall sect cultivators immediately sat down around him. Meanwhile, Zhao Jinhin glanced at Feng Tiandu for a moment longer before returning to the group of Northern Glacial Immortal Palace cultivators. The other factions in the cave were also waiting for the Immortal Manor to descend, and with so many people present, the cave was virtually entirely filled. Su Yangzi had also returned to the group, and Taoist Huyan approached him to exchange a few words. After hearing what Taoist Huyan had to say, Su Yangzi was initially quite disgruntled, glowering at Han Li with a furious expression. But as Taoist Huyan continued, the fury on Su Yangzi's face gradually faded, and in the end, he gave a reluctant nod. Han Li heaved an internal sigh of relief upon seeing this, then closed his eyes to meditate. 2 days passed by in the blink of an eye. The gate of light in the cave had swelled to over twice its original size, and the patterns on its surface had become extremely clear, making it seem as if it really were a spatial gate that led to another world. Hovering within the gate of light was a ball of blue light that was churning violently and giving off radiant blue light. A spatial passageway could be seen within the ball of light, but it was unclear where it led to. At this point, everyone in the cave had already risen to their feet and were intently scrutinizing the gate of light, which was trembling incessantly. The nearby space was also buzzing and trembling, causing the entire cave to shudder and sway. The rainbow cage of light around the gate was still standing, but it was clearly being overwhelmed. The 6 golden immortals rose up into the air once again at Feng Tiandu's instruction, before attempting to fortify the cage of light. But their efforts proved to be futile as the light radiating out of the blue gate was becoming brighter and brighter, slowly forcing the rainbow cage outward. All of a sudden, the ball of blue light within the gate abruptly swelled to several times its original size, virtually filling the entire blue gate while fluctuating in size in an unstable fashion. At the same time, waves of rippling blue light erupted out of the gate, and all of the space in the wake of the rippling immediately blurred and warped. Before long, the rainbow cage was completely shattered, and the 6 golden immortals around it were instantly sent flying back. But they were already prepared for this outcome, and they were able to escape injury by activating some protective secret techniques. "There's not much time left, so there's no need to continue," Feng Tiandu said as he stared intently at the gate of light. Right at this moment, the entire gate of light exploded violently amid a resounding boom, transforming into a ball of radiant blue light. A projection of a series of mountains, rivers, palaces, and pavilions appeared deep within the ball of light, but it was unclear what location the projection was depicting. The ball of blue light was slowly revolving while hovering in midair, and rays of translucent blue light were emanating from within alongside a cloud of faint white mist. The scene within the ball of light was already rather indistinct, and it was made even more obscure by the layer of faint mist. After a brief silence, someone yelled in an excited voice, "There it is." Their excitement was contagious, and everyone else's eyes immediately lit up. Henley swept his spiritual sense toward the ball of blue light, and his soul immediately shuddered violently. It was as if a rumbling thunderclap had rung out directly beside his ears, and his expression remained unchanged, but he hurriedly withdrew his spiritual sense in alarm. At the same time, he could see that the complexions of many of the people present had also paled slightly, clearly indicating that they had also suffered some backlash after extending their spiritual sense toward the ball of blue light. Han Li's spiritual sense was comparable to a golden immortal, yet even he had suffered some minor degree of backlash, so the other true immortals were naturally only going to fare worse. As for the golden immortals present, they were able to avoid substantial backlash, but it seemed that they weren't able to make much inroads with their spiritual sense, either. "Fellow Taoist Luo, fellow Taoist Feng, why don't you two go on ahead?" Zio Jinhin offered with a smile. We couldn't do that, fellow Taoist Zio. Your immortal palace has done such a good job of protecting the entrance up to this point. The right to enter the immortal manor first should be reserved for you. Wouldn't you agree, fellow Taoist Feng? Luo Qinghai jibed. Feng Tiandu's expression remained unchanged, and he merely gave a cold harumph in response. Before Zio Jinhin had a chance to respond, Gling interjected, "If the three of you are unable to reach a consensus, then I'll go first." She then pulled out her Infernal Frost scenic painting and gave a gentle shake, upon which a vast expanse of light surged out from within to envelop her entire body before carrying her into the ball of blue light. Everyone faltered slightly upon seeing this, following which a hint of agitation began to spread through the crowd. Han Li looked on with a contemplative expression as Gling vanished into the ball of blue light. Zio Jinhin turned to Zhu Weiying and the others, then instructed, "All of you come with me. The rest will stay here." He then summoned his Infernal Frost scenic painting, and a burst of blue light surged forth to envelop himself, as well as 8 immortal palace cultivators and the 3 Dao lords of the Blaze Dragon Dao. Immediately thereafter, the group flew into the ball of blue light, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, the rest of the Immortal Palace cultivators and the Black Wind Island cultivators remained outside. After all of the Immortal Palace cultivators had entered the Immortal Manor, Luo Qinghai offered for Feng Tiandu to go ahead, but the latter remained unmoved. Hence, Luo Qinghai called upon the cultivators of the Vast Flow Palace before summoning his Infernal Frost scenic painting, and before long, they had also flown into the ball of blue light. Only then did Feng Tiandu take a glance at Qi Tianxiao, and the latter instructed the Dawnfall sect's cultivators to assemble before flying into the ball of blue light as well. At this point, the number of cultivators present had been reduced by around half, and the remaining factions were naturally all raring to go. Chen Pai spoke briefly with the Southern Dawn beings, then made his way toward Han Li's group again. "Fellow Taoist Gu, I think we should let the Southern Dawn beings go in first, and our Ghost Whale sect will go in after them. Once we're in there, we'll wait for your group to come in so all of us can explore the Immortal Manor together," Chen Pai said. "That sounds like a good plan, fellow Taoist Chen," Taoist Huyan replied with a smile. Chen Pai could see that the Southern Dawn beings had already entered the ball of blue light, and he hurriedly said, "All right, then we'll be going ahead." Following the departure of the Ghost Whale sect cultivators, Taoist Huyan said to Han Li and the others, "Looks like it's our turn." Su Yangzi gestured for everyone to gather together, and there was still a hint of displeasure in his eyes as his gaze swept over Han Li and Lu Yuking. The Immortal Manor is filled with treasures, but also fraught with peril, so after we get in there, let's do our best to stay together and not get separated, Taoist Huyan cautioned. He then pulled out an Infernal Frost scenic painting of his own, and it released a burst of blue light that swept up everyone before flying into the blue entrance. In the instant that they entered the ball of blue light, Han Li felt a burst of buzzing ring out beside his ears, immediately following which all of his senses virtually completely faded, leaving only a hazy consciousness behind. It was an indescribable sensation that was very disconcerting, but thankfully, everything returned to normal after less than 20 seconds. As Han Li's senses gradually recovered, he heard the sound of howling wind blowing past his ears. He was greeted by the sight of a pristine white world that was covered in snow, and the entire surrounding area was filled with glacial qi. On the distant horizon were countless giant tornadoes that stood like pillars between heaven and earth, presenting an awe-inspiring sight to behold. A layer of azure light appeared over his body to keep the wind and snow at bay, but he could still feel a bone-chilling sensation seeping into his body. He looked around to find that the factions that had previously entered the Immortal Manor were already nowhere to be seen. Yuking had conjured up a layer of protective spiritual light as well, but a layer of frost had already appeared over her eyelashes, and she exclaimed, "It's so cold." The crimson robes being worn by the true flame sect cultivators were glowing brightly, and waves of heat were surging out from within, but even so, they weren't faring much better. Su Yangzi and the other golden immortals were doing just fine, but the other true flame sect cultivators were all shivering uncontrollably. "Please use your scenic painting to shelter everyone, fellow Taoist Gu," Su Yangzi said as he turned to Taoist Hu Yan. Taoist Hu Yan nodded in response, then flipped a hand over to produce his infernal frost scenic painting, which unfurled in front of him. Immediately thereafter, a spherical light barrier emerged from the painting to encompass everyone. As soon as the light barrier appeared, the sound of the howling wind instantly subsided, while the unbearing bone-chilling sensation was also kept at bay. "The Southern Dawn beings and the Ghost Whale sect cultivators are nowhere to be seen," Yun Nai remarked. "There's no integrity or reliability to speak of when it comes to a bunch of ghostly cultivators and foreign race beings. They most likely already departed on their own as they didn't want to fall behind everyone else," Elder Zhen Yun sneered. "I don't think that's the case. Chen Pai took the initiative to approach us earlier, and I think he was earnest about forging an alliance. Compared with the likes of the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace, the Vast Flow Palace, and the Dawnfall sect, our individual factions are far too vulnerable, so it's necessary for us to band together. Hence, I don't think they would have gone back on their word just to get ahead of us," Su Yangzi said with a shake of his head. Han Li turned to Taoist Hu Yan as he said, "I can sense some traces of spatial power in the snowstorm here. Perhaps they were teleported elsewhere against their will." "I also think that's a possibility," Taoist Hu Yan replied. "Seeing as we can't find them for now, let's leave this area first. In any case, we must proceed with caution. Make sure to stay by my side and do not leave this light barrier from the infernal frost scenic painting." Everyone immediately gave affirmative responses to this. Right as Taoist Hu Yan was about to set off, Han Li's voice suddenly rang out beside his ears through voice transmission. "Senior Hu Yan, I've already entered the infernal frost immortal manor with you, so would you be able to give me the next 3 levels of the mantra axis scripture now?" Taoist Hu Yan faltered slightly upon hearing this, then grumbled, "Isn't it too early to be asking for compensation? We've only just entered the immortal manor and haven't even done anything yet." "But you promised that you would give me the 4th level of the cultivation art upon entering the immortal manor," Han Li replied with a smile. Taoist Hu Yan was familiar with Han Li's personality, so he wasn't bothered by this, and he removed a storage pouch strapped to his waist before handing it to Han Li as he said, "The immortal manor is a very dangerous place, so here are some life-saving treasures. Make sure you don't lose them." Han Li hurriedly accepted the storage pouch, then briefly examined its contents with his spiritual sense before putting on a facade of gratitude and excitement as he said, "Thank you, Uncle." No one was suspicious of this, thinking that this was just a routine precautionary measure. "Which direction should we go in? Everything looks the same here," Han Li said as he stowed the storage pouch away. He had just tried to examine the surrounding area with his bright sight spirit eyes, but no matter where he looked, he saw nothing but a vast expanse of snow and ice. Taoist Hu Yan's brows furrowed slightly as he turned his gaze to his infernal frost scenic painting, trying to find the right way forward when all of a sudden, Yuking pointed in a certain direction and said, "There seems to be an exit over there." Everyone turned to the direction that she was pointing in, and sure enough, there was an indistinct ball of blue light in the extremely far distance, something that would have been impossible to spot unless one were to look very closely. Han Li knew that Lu Yuking possessed a special ocular ability, so he wasn't all that surprised. However, he had previously looked in that direction, but hadn't seen any speck of blue light, so it seemed that it had only just appeared. A hint of bewilderment appeared in Taoist Hu Yan's eyes as he took a glance at Lu Yuking. After all, even with his eyesight as a golden immortal, he had failed to notice the speck of blue light. Hence, everyone began to travel in that direction under the protection of the spherical light barrier. As they drew closer and closer, the speck of blue light expanded further and further, and Han Li and the others were gradually able to see the entire thing. It was indeed a blue spatial vortex, and it was releasing very similar energy fluctuation to the vortex that they had just entered through. All of a sudden, the space up above abruptly shuddered, following which all of the snowflakes in the sky were rendered completely stationary. Immediately thereafter, the snowflake converged to form a giant snow dragon that was over 1,000 feet thick, swooping down upon everyone with tremendous power. A resounding boom rang out as the blue light barrier around everyone was struck by the snow dragon and was violently shattered. The wind and snow that surged into the broken light barrier had become extremely violent, and it split up everyone in different directions before hurling them high up into the sky. The power released by the exploding snow dragon was so fierce that an extremely violent windstorm was swept up, and everyone was frantically trying to steady themselves in midair, but they were unable to do so, and the gusts of ferocious wind sent them flying away in different directions. Bright azure light emerged over Han Li's body as his thunderstorm wings appeared on his back, and he flapped them with all his might, doing everything in his power to stabilize himself. He was just about to search for Taoist Hu Yan when he spotted a black shadow hurtling rapidly toward him, following which he felt a soft body wrap itself around him. Han Li had only just barely managed to steady himself, but the impact of having someone else crash into him tipped him off balance once again, and he fell involuntarily into a gust of ferocious wind. The world spun rapidly around him, and he didn't get a chance to see who it was that was clinging to him before he fell unconscious. On a vast and windy snowland, the space in this area was far more stable than in the previous area, and the landscape was riddled with massive cedar trees that were covered in snow. There were around a dozen figures standing in front of a cluster of cedar trees, and they were led by none other than Deputy Palace Master Zhu Wang of the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace. Even though they were standing together, it was clear that there was some division among them. The Northern Glacial Immortal Palace cultivators were all gathered together, while the 3 Dao Lords of the Blaze Dragon Dao were standing a bit further away. The Immortal Manor will only be open for a year. Why is it that Palace Master Zio hasn't come to meet up with us? Ouyang Qiushan asked as he took a glance at the snowland around him. We wouldn't have to act so urgently if the location of the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor's entrance hadn't been leaked, Zhu Wang said in a cold voice. It was clear that she was suspecting the 3 Dao Lords of leaking the location of the entrance. Ouyang Qiushan's expression darkened slightly upon hearing this, and he gave a cold harump before falling silent. The Palace Master is taking care of the people entering the Immortal Manor after us. He's going to send them into the spatial storm to separate them, and that'll make them much easier to deal with. Even if any of them dare to oppose us, we'll be able to divide and conquer them, rather than having to face them all at once, Zhu Wang explained. The 3 Dao Lords exchanged a glance, with complex looks in their eyes upon hearing this. There was a nameless gray desert that was covered in gray pebbles of different sizes. The desert was completely devoid of vegetation, and there were patches of snow littered across the landscape. At the center of the desert was a winding channel that had seemingly been bored into the ground over time by flowing streams of melted snow, and there were some ponds of different sizes inside, the surfaces of which had all been frozen solid. Laying beside the channel on the trunk of a fallen cedar tree were a pair of unconscious figures, one male and one female. The man was laying face down on the ground, so it was impossible to glean his appearance, while the woman was extremely beautiful. At this moment, the woman's arms were wound firmly around the man's waist, while her face was pressed tightly against his side, presenting a rather intimate sight to behold. Right at this moment, the man suddenly shuddered before regaining consciousness. He turned over before getting up into a seated position, then began inspecting his surroundings with a slightly disoriented look on his face. The man was none other than Han Li in disguise, and at this moment, there was no one else with him aside from the young woman that was clinging to his side. Taoist Hu Yan, Yun Nai, and the others were all nowhere to be seen. "Fellow Taoist Lu," Han Li called out as he patted the woman on the shoulder with a layer of azure light over the palm of his hand. The woman was none other than Lu Yuking, and she gave a muffled groan before also regaining consciousness. After taking a glance at Han Li, she inspected her surroundings with a dazed expression while massaging her own temples as she asked, "Where are we, Brother Liu?" Han Li didn't immediately reply. Instead, he began to inspect his surroundings with his spiritual sense and his bright-sight spirit eyes. A short while later, he withdrew his gaze as he said, "We're definitely still in the infernal frost immortal manor, but I don't know exactly where we are." "Where is everyone else? Why are we the only ones here?" Lu Yuking asked with a puzzled expression. "It seems like we were attacked earlier and swept up into a spatial storm that separated everyone. It appears we're the only two to have ended up here," Han Li replied with a wry smile. Only after hearing this did Lu Yuking recall how she had clung desperately to Han Li in a blind panic during the storm, and a faint blush immediately appeared on her face. "What do we do now?" she hurriedly asked in order to mask her own embarrassment. Han Li fell into deep thought upon hearing this. The original plan was for everyone to travel together, so he still didn't get a chance to ask Taoist Hu Yan about the internal layout of the Immortal Manor. "I scoured the area with my spiritual sense just now, and there are no clear spiritual power fluctuations nearby. However, the further we go in that direction, the lower the air temperature becomes," Han Li said as he pointed in a certain direction. "In that case, that's where we should go. That should be the first area of the infernal frost immortal manor, the light frost region," Lu Yuking said. "How do you know about this, fellow Taoist Lu?" Han Li asked as he turned to Lu Yuking with a puzzled expression. "As I said earlier, our Black Wind Island discovered the entrance of the infernal frost immortal manor even earlier than the northern glacial immortal palace. And even though we've been ordered to keep everything about the Immortal Manor secret, my father still conducted a great deal of research into the Immortal Manor in advance," Lu Yuking explained. A peculiar look appeared on Han Li's face as he asked, "In that case, was it your father that leaked the location of the Immortal Manor's entrance in secret?" This was not just a completely baseless theory from Han Li. Black Wind Island had guarded the entrance of the Immortal Manor for the northern glacial Immortal Palace for many years, yet they had received no reward at all for their efforts, and not even a single one of the Immortal Palaces, 12 spots had been granted to them. As a result, Lu Yuking had no choice but to implore Han Li to request a spot for her from Taoist Hu Yan, and only then was she able to enter the infernal frost Immortal Manor. Lu Yuking was terrified to hear this, and she hurriedly waved her hands as she denied, "Please don't make such damning accusations, Brother Liu. We wouldn't dare to do something like that. If the Immortal Palace pins the blame on us, then our entire island runs the risk of being wiped out." Han Li had no intention of pursuing this matter, and he smiled as he reassured, "Don't worry, I was just curious. I didn't mean to cause any alarm." The location of the Immortal Manor's entrance being leaked was a positive development for Han Li, and he didn't care who it was that had leaked this information. Even though he had joined forces with Taoist Hu Yan and the True Flame sect, they still couldn't compare with the likes of the Northern Glacial Immortal Palace and the Dawnfall sect. In the wake of the location of the entrance being leaked, many powers had been able to get involved, thereby completely muddying the waters, and that could only benefit people like Han Li. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li took a glance into the distance, then swept a hand through the air to summon an azure flying boat with 4 azure wings on either side. "Let's go. There's no point in staying here any longer," he said to Lu Yuking, then flew onto the spirit boat. Lu Yuking nodded in response before also springing up into the air and landing on the flying boat behind Han Li. The flying boat then sped away as a streak of azure light at Han Li's behest. There was a blanket of dark clouds hanging in the sky at a low altitude, giving the entire area a rather oppressive atmosphere. It was a very bleak and desolate area with no living creatures in sight, nor any sounds to be heard aside from that of the passing wind. After flying for a few minutes, snowflakes suddenly began to drift through the air. Initially, the snow was quite sparse, but as they continued onward, the snowfall became heavier and heavier. At the same time, the environment beneath them gradually began to change. As they left the gray desert behind, they arrived on a vast ice field. The clouds in the sky had darkened significantly, and the snowflakes drifting through the air also appeared significantly heavier than before, falling from the sky thick and fast. Thankfully, this area wasn't filled with the same intense cold as the initial area that they had arrived in upon entering the Immortal Manor, and the layers of protective spiritual light over their bodies were sufficient to keep them warm. Due to the dark clouds and heavy snowfall, visibility on the ice field was extremely low, and even though Han Li couldn't detect any clear spiritual power fluctuations with his spiritual sense, he could never be sure where there were any unforeseen hazards lurking in this alien environment. The snowfall was gradually becoming heavier and heavier, and visibility certainly wasn't improving. The azure spirit boat was flying through the air quite slowly at Han Li's behest, and the wings on either side of it were releasing a layer of azure light that enveloped the entire boat, as well as Han Li's duo. Dense flurries of snow were falling upon the azure light barrier, only to be kept at bay, and the heavy snowfall didn't have much of an impact on the advancement of the spirit boat. "This snowstorm is rather strange. My spirit eye ability is severely limited here. Can you see a bit further with your illusory ghost eyes?" Han Li asked with slightly furrowed brows. "I'm not able to see very far either. On top of that, my spiritual sense is also being disrupted as well, and I'm only able to just barely detect things several kilometers away at most," Lu Yuking replied with a shake of her head. Han Li nodded in response. As the snowfall became heavier and heavier, he also found his spiritual sense being severely limited, and his sensory range was also fluctuating in an inconsistent manner. After flying for several dozen more kilometers, Han Li suddenly pointed in a certain direction down below as he said, "There seems to be something over there." "It seems to be some type of palace," Lu Yuking mused as she turned in that direction. The rooftops of a series of pavilions and tall pagodas could just barely be made out deep within the snow. "Let's go down and take a look," Han Li said, and the spirit boat swooped directly downward at his behest, arriving in front of the cluster of buildings. Only after the spirit boat was stowed away and the two of them landed on the ground did they discover that the snow here wasn't as deep as they had imagined. It only just barely reached their ankles, and beneath their feet were solid stone slabs. After taking a moment to inspect their surroundings, they began to trudge over the snow-covered plaza deeper into the cluster of buildings. Standing directly in front of them was a red archway that was several dozen feet tall. It had only 2 pillars, and it wasn't particularly ostentatious. There was a thick layer of snow on top of the archway, and the characters inscribed on it were rather indistinct, making it impossible to tell what had been written. Only after getting close to the archway did Han Li and Lu Yuking notice that its pillars were riddled with runes, but the spiritual qi that they contained had already completely run out, indicating that they no longer served their original purpose. The 2 of them didn't linger here for long, passing through the archway before arriving in front of a large palace with a resting hill roof. From the outside, the palace appeared mostly intact, with only one half of its gate missing. The stone staircase in front of the entrance was under the eave, so no snow had fallen upon it. However, there was a deep black mark on its surface, as if someone had cleaved it in half with some type of weapon. I can understand the presence of runes on the pillars of the archway, but why are there runes on their stone steps as well? Lu Yuking asked with a perplexed expression. If I'm not mistaken, this area was mostly encompassed within a concealment formation, and the archway, these stone steps, and some of the bricks on the plaza collectively served as the core of the formation, but they've clearly been destroyed, Han Li mused. Are you saying someone came here before us? Lu Yuking asked in a quiet voice as she took an uneasy glance at her surroundings. The spiritual qi in the formation here has already completely faded, so the formation had to have been destroyed a very long time ago. I'm presuming someone came here during a previous occasion of the Immortal Manor's emergence before destroying the formation and taking whatever treasures were in here, Han Li replied. Lu Yuking was quite relieved to hear this, but also a little disappointed that the treasures here were already gone, and she said, "In that case, let's keep going and not waste any more time here." There's no hurry. There should be many places like this in the Immortal Manor, and we could encounter the same type of formation going forward. If we examine how the formation here was set up, we'll be able to save a lot of time bypassing further formations of a similar nature if we encounter any, Han Li said. You're right, why didn't I think of that? You're much more experienced and thoughtful than I am, Brother Liu, Lu Yuking said with a hint of admiration in her eyes. Han Li merely smiled as he made his way up the stone steps, then strode into the palace through the semi-destroyed gates. Meanwhile, Lu Yuking trailed along behind him in a cautious manner. The palace was completely empty, and there were several holes in the roof that snow was falling through, but the snow dissipated on its own before it could land on the ground. After emerging from the back door of the palace, Han Li and Lu Yuking were greeted by the sight of several more palaces and a 3-story pavilion. Just like the palace from before, there wasn't any clear damage, and everything inside had already been looted. Let's go. Standing at the foot of the pavilion, Han Li summoned the Azure Spirit boat again, then called out to Lu Yuking, and the 2 of them continued on their journey. The snowfall up ahead was still quite dense and heavy, and the deeper they progressed into the ice field, the more clusters of buildings that they encountered. The largest one of them was over 10 times larger than the one they had first encountered, while the smaller ones were just individual pavilions and pagodas, and it seemed that was where the servants stayed. However, all of them had already been looted, while the restrictions around them had been destroyed. Han Li wasn't surprised by this at all, but Lu Yuking was pouting in disappointment, seemingly quite dismayed. Fortunately, their journey proved to be quite peaceful thus far, and they didn't encounter any other people or demon beasts. The 2 of them continued deeper and deeper into the ice field, and the snowstorm was gradually becoming more and more ferocious, while their spiritual sense was also being more and more heavily restricted, to the point that even Han Li's spiritual sensory range had been cut down to only a few dozen kilometers. After flying over a short, snow-covered mountain range, Han Li spotted another cluster of buildings situated in a valley up ahead. He alerted Lu Yuking to this, then directed the spirit boat into the valley. As they drew close to the valley, they saw a snow-covered stoned lion that was several dozen feet tall, standing to the left of the valley's entrance. There was another stone lion on the right, and it was also covered in snow, but this one was laying on its side. After descending in front of valley, Han Li made his way over to the stone lion on the left before brushing away the snow on it, to reveal a series of complex runes that were slightly different from the ones that he had seen earlier, but he could tell that they were roughly the same type of restriction. The restrictions here have already been destroyed, so it looks like we won't have to enter the valley, Lu Yuking mused with a disappointed expression. Han Li was just about to respond when his brows suddenly furrowed slightly, and he grabbed onto Lu Yuking's shoulder before hurtling back in retreat until his back hit the rock wall behind him. All of a sudden, the stone lion that was laying on the right side of the valley's entrance abruptly sprung to life, springing up from the ground before sending a massive paw crashing down toward Han Li and Lu Yuking with tremendous force. A thick layer of snow fell off the stone lion's body, yet there was nothing under the snow aside from more snow, and it was as if it were a snow beast that had a body of ice and snow. Only in the instant right before it reared up from the ground was Han Li able to detect that it wasn't just a lifeless stone lion as it seemed. Han Li raised a fist, and a layer of azure light appeared over it as he threw a punch directly upward. An azure fist projection tore through the wind and snow before clashing against the paw of the snow lion, and a resounding boom rang out as the paw exploded into a cloud of snowy mist upon contact with the fist projection. Before Han Li had a chance to withdraw his fist, his brows furrowed slightly, and he could feel a burst of intense chill seeping into his fist, upon which a layer of white frost instantly appeared over his knuckles. He hurriedly withdrew his fist in alarm, and in the meantime, a blue vortex was taking shape on the snow lion's raised front paw. Bursts of fierce suction force were emanating out of the blue vortex, sucking in all of the surrounding snow. As more and more snow surged into the vortex, the destroyed front paw of the snow lion was mostly healed in the blink of an eye. "That's not a puppet or anything like that, Brother Liu. It's a frost beast that's unique to this immortal manor. If you don't shatter the frost core in its body, it'll be able to keep drawing upon the snow in the area indefinitely to heal its own wounds, making it near unkillable," Lu Yuking hurriedly said. "Frost core, what's that?" Han Li asked while staring intently at the recovering frost beast. "It's an extreme frost crystal that's nurtured in the body of the beast. It's a bit like a demon beast's demon core, and it's commonly found directly behind a snow beast's eyes," Lu Yuking hurriedly replied. Han Li immediately focused his gaze on the blue eyes of the snow lion upon hearing this, following which an azure flying sword shot out of his sleeve, reaching the left eye of the snow lion in a flash. The frost beast didn't appear to be very intelligent, and in the face of the oncoming flying sword, it swatted directly at it with its front paw, the same one that was still yet to make a full recovery. The flying sword was very fast, but it wasn't imbued with much power. However, in the instant that it came into contact with the paw of the snow lion, a flurry of sword light erupted forth in all directions like a blooming sword lotus flower, instantly destroying the entire leg connected to the snow lion's paw. At the same time, a streak of azure sword chi shot straight through the snow lion's left eye, cleaving its head in half. A sharp clang rang out as the tip of the flying sword pierced into the blue crystal that was around the size of a human head, but it was only able to penetrate around an inch into the crystal. Traces of white light were surging over the crystal, and a flurry of snow instantly converged toward the snow lion's head. Han Li naturally wasn't going to give the snow lion a chance to recover, and he immediately made a hand seal, upon which arcs of golden lightning erupted out of the flying sword that was embedded into the blue crystal, forming a net of golden lightning that instantly swallowed up the snow lion's entire head. The flurries of snow that was converging toward the snow lion's head instantly exploded upon contact with the net of golden lightning, unable to reach the snow lion to facilitate its healing. A resounding boom rang out as the frost core in the snow lion's head was reduced to powder by the eruption of golden lightning, and the snow lion instantly stiffened before collapsing to the ground, disintegrating into a pile of snow that fell away in all directions. Hanli made a beckoning motion, and the azure flying sword instantly flew back up his sleeve as a streak of light. "That was amazing, Brother Liu." Lu Yuking cheered as she clapped her hands together with glee, then hurriedly made her way over to the snow lion's remains before rummaging through the pile of snow. Moments later, she stood up with a hint of disappointment on her face and sighed. "Your attack was too powerful, Brother Liu. The frost core was completely destroyed." "Why do you want its frost core?" Han Li asked. "The frost cores of these frost beasts contain immense glacial qi, but they're not of the yin attribute. They're very much sought after in the Black Wind Sea, and they can be sold for quite a bit of spirit stones in Black Wind City," Lu Yuking explained. Han Li merely nodded in response and didn't say anything as he made his way into the valley, then strode toward the cluster of buildings inside. The mountain path in the valley was rather narrow, and the snow covering it was even thicker than what was outside the valley, easily reaching up to waist height. Hence, Han Li used a levitation technique to float above the snow as he strode into the valley. Lu Yuking did the same as she trailed along behind Han Li. The two of them continued into the valley for a few more minutes without encountering any further frost beasts, and they arrived on a flat and level plaza. Just like before, the snowstorms in all of the places where there were buildings were a bit less ferocious, and the snow on the ground also wouldn't be as deep. The cluster of buildings in the valley was quite large, taking up virtually the entire valley, and it would have looked like a small town had it not been for the fact that all of the buildings were extremely grand and majestic. Many of the pillars and eaves had profound runes inscribed upon them, but almost all of them had been destroyed as well, and the treasures in this place had naturally also already been looted. It took Han Li and Liu Yuking close to 2 hours to examine all of the buildings one by one, and they only discovered some destroyed treasures inside that were completely worthless. After emerging from the final pavilion, Han Li cast his gaze into the distance to find that there was a translucent, icy mountain face at the end of the valley. At the foot of the mountain face was a cave that was several dozen feet tall, and it was impossible to tell how deep the cave ran. Han Li and Lu Yuking exchanged a glance with one another, then made their way to the end of the valley. Arriving in front of the cave, the two of them then peered into the cave to find that it was quite dim inside, but there was a speck of white light several thousand feet away, and that seemed to be where the cave ended. Blue light flashed within Han Li's eyes as he released his spiritual sense into the cave, and moments later, he shook his head before making his way into the cave. Lu Yuking was about to ask if he had detected anything, but with Han Li striding forward in silence, she could only follow along. Only after entering the cave did Han Li discover that the walls on either side, the roof of the cave, and even the ground beneath his feet were all flat surfaces of hard blue ice that were as smooth as mirrors. It was very quiet inside the cave, and only the sound of Han Li and Lu Yuking's footsteps could be heard ringing out within it. Han Li wasn't walking very quickly, and he would occasionally stop and inspect his surroundings momentarily before continuing onward. After this had happened 3 times, Lu Yuking was finally unable to suppress her curiosity, and she asked, "Why do you keep stopping, Brother Liu? Have you discovered something?" Instead of giving a response, Han Li merely shook his head, then continued with what he was doing in silence. Yuking could only follow along with a puzzled expression. Upon reaching the exact middle point of the cave, Li stopped once again. He stood with his eyes closed for a while, then crouched down and pressed a palm against the ground. Blue light was flashing in his eyes, and he fell into deep thought. Moments later, he said, "I can hear something down there." Before Yuking had a chance to reply, Li abruptly thrust his palm downward, and a loud crack rang out, following which the ice beneath his palm was shattered, and a series of cracks spread outward in all directions like a system of cobwebs. Li stood back up and took a few steps backward, following which the area that he had just pressed down on caved in to reveal an ovular hole that was around 10 feet in size. The sound of blowing wind could be heard coming from the hole, and it seemed that there was a huge space in there. Li immediately jumped into the hole, and Yuking didn't even get a chance to ask him what he had discovered before he was already out of sight. Hence, she had no choice but to jump down as well. The two of them fell through the hole one after another, and it was only a short fall before they landed on the ground. Li could feel that the soil beneath his feet was a little damp and loamy, and he looked up to find a sheet of blue ice that was around 3 feet thick above his head. Yuking looked around to find that they were standing in a pitch-black underground passageway, and she asked in a puzzled voice, "What is this place, Brother Liu? It feels a little strange here." Li raised a finger to his lips in a quieting gesture as he said, "Stay quiet for now and come with me." Yuking immediately fell silent and trailed long behind Li as he made his way down the passageway, which led downward on a gradual slope. After descending for over 1,000 feet along the passageway, the two of them drew to a halt. Faint rays of light were shining into the passageway from up ahead, and bursts of dull rumbling could also be heard ringing out in the distance. The two of them exchanged a glance, then concealed their auras in unison before continuing onward. Upon arriving at the end of the passageway, they discovered that the rumbling had grown even louder, and it was reverberating throughout the entire passageway. Li strode over to the exit of the passageway to find himself standing atop a sheer cliff, beneath which was an enormous underground karst cave. He cast his gaze toward the center of the cave, to find that there was a battle taking place there between a pair of humanoid figures and several enormous frost beasts. At the very center of the cave was a large white stone plaza that had been artificially carved out, upon which stood a palace, but it had been destroyed and reduced to rubble. Li noticed that the attire worn by the two figures on the plaza was quite familiar. One of them was a tall and imposing middle-aged man dressed in a black robe with a skull design embroidered onto the collar, and he was clearly a ghost whale sect cultivator. The other figure was a short and wizened elderly man, dressed in a black vest with a black bandana around his head, and he was a Southern Dawn being. Prior to this, Li's attention had been focused entirely on the golden immortals of the two factions, so he hadn't paid any heed to the other ghost whale sect and Southern Dawn race cultivators. As a result, he had no recollection of these two. Taking a closer look, Li discovered that despite the elderly man's small stature, his powers were quite formidable. He was wielding a huge golden halberd that was twice as tall as himself, and it resembled a giant golden fan as he swung it through the air. He was facing a pair of snow lions that were both dozens of feet tall, and whenever they tried to lash out at the elderly man with their paws, they would be struck by the halberd, which would either inflict huge gashes or sever the paws entirely from their bodies. As for the middle-aged man from the ghost whale sect, he was completely unarmed and locked in battle against a pair of snow apes. White light was radiating from his fists, and there were specks of blue light shimmering within the white radiance. With each punch that he threw, a resounding boom would ring out, and whatever part of the snow ape's bodies that came into contact with his fist would instantly explode into powder. It seemed that the two of them held a decisive upper hand, but in reality, this was far from a favorable situation for them. The frost beasts seemed to be unable to feel any pain, and regardless of how severe their injuries were, they were always able to quickly make a full recovery, regenerating significantly faster than the snow lion that Han Li and Liu Yuking had faced earlier. What was most damning of all was that aside from these four frost beasts, there was also a snow dove that looked as if it had been carved out of ice, standing atop the wreckage of the destroyed palace, and it was staring intently at the two cultivators. It was clear that if either of the two of them were to display any signs of weakness or lapses in concentration, then the snow dove would instantly strike with lightning speed. In contrast with the four other frost beasts, it was able to shoot arrow-like strands of silver ice out of its sharp beak, and the strands of ice were imbued with ice attribute law powers, so the two cultivators had to be wary even with their true immortal stage cultivation bases. After observing the ongoing battle and the cultivation arts being used by the two cultivators for some time, Han Li's brows furrowed ever so slightly, following which a hint of surprise and recognition appeared on his face. Could it really be them? Right Han Li was lost in thought. The snow dove suddenly spread its wings before swooping down from above, gliding past the pair of snow apes in the blink of an eye before lashing out with its talons at the black-robed middle-aged man, who was still slightly off balance after throwing a punch. The black-robed man was quite startled by this abrupt sneak attack, but he seemed to have quite a vast wealth of battle experience, and 7 specks of blue light appeared over his chest and abdomen, immediately following which 11 more specks of blue light emerged over the rest of his body. A layer of starry white light then surfaced over his entire body, just in time to protect him from the snow dove's talon strike. The hideous sound of metal grating on metal rang out as the snow dove's talons scraped over the black-robed man's neck and shoulder, causing the layer of white light over his body to shudder, but it was ultimately able to remain intact. After passing by the black-robed man, the snow dove suddenly twisted around and opened its beak to release a strand of silver ice, which shot forth directly toward the black-robed man's heart like a speeding arrow. At this point, the black-robed man had already managed to withdraw his fist, and he immediately threw another punch toward the silver arrow as a ball of dazzling white light erupted out of his fist. A resounding boom rang out as the silver arrow and the white light around the black-robed man's fist exploded in unison. A cloud of glacial chi immediately spread through the air, while a layer of blue ice crystals appeared over the black-robed man's right arm. Before he had a chance to remove the layer of ice crystals, one of the snow apes that he had been locked in battle against barreled into him from the side, sending him flying through the air. Another resounding boom rang out as the black-robed man crashed into a stone wall, and his entire body was embedded into it, while a series of cracks spread out over the wall around him in all directions. However, the black-robed man was quickly able to pull his arm out of the wall, then slammed his fist into the wall to propel his own body forward, and it didn't appear as if he had suffered any injuries. A displeased look appeared on the black-robed man's face as he yelled at his companion, "Fellow Taoist Xing Shan, if you continue to insisting on holding back and refrain from displaying your full power, then I think it would be best for us to go our separate ways." The elderly man was also quite disgruntled, and he countered, "What right do you have to criticize me? If you hadn't insisted on taking this detour, we wouldn't have fallen into this trap. Not only have we not managed to reap any rewards here, we've been forced to engage these frost beasts in this pointless battle. I only made a suggestion to come down here, and you raised no objections. There's always an inevitable element of risk when it comes to searching for treasures in a place like the infernal frost immortal manor. There are only a few frost beasts here, so let's just take care of them and move on instead of wasting any more time here," the black-robed man argued. I said that we should focus on our primary objective, but you were determined to come down here, so what could I do but agree? The elderly man grumbled. The two cultivators in the cave were none other than Xingshan and Patriarch Cold Flame, both of whom Han Li was quite familiar with. What was rather perplexing to Han Li was that one of them had clearly come here as part of the Ghost Whale sect, while the other had concealed himself among the Southern Dawn beings. So how had they met up with one another? Furthermore, not only had they appeared in the same place, judging from their conversation, it appeared that they were working together. Could it be that they had been acquaintances prior to entering the Immortal manor? Patriarch Cold Flame knew that he wasn't going to be able to win this argument, so he conceded. Fine, I'll admit that I'm at fault on this occasion. If you insist on assigning blame, then once we get to that place and find what we're looking for, you can go first and pick out whichever item you want. For now, let's take care of these frost beasts and get out of here as soon as possible. Xingshan didn't waste any more time with words upon hearing this, and with a flick of his wrist, he stowed the golden halberd away before making a hand seal. Immediately thereafter, late true immortal stage spiritual power fluctuations began to emanate from his body, and layers upon layers of golden sword projections appeared behind him like the unfurling train of a peacock, radiating dazzling golden light. All of the golden sword projections then instantly shot forth at his behest, surging toward the pair of snow lion frost beasts before completely inundating them like a turbulent wave. Loud clangs rang out in rapid succession within the wave of sword projections, and white and golden light flashed incessantly. By the time all of the sword projections had swept through the air, the bodies of the pair of snow lions had been completely stripped away to reveal their frost cores, which were hovering in midair while absorbing the nearby snow and glacial qi. Xingshan lunged forward with his golden longsword held in his grasp, instantly shattering the pair of frost cores with a single slash of his sword to put a complete end to the pair of snow lions. Meanwhile, the snow dove circled around in midair before swooping toward him. On the other side, all of Patriarch Cold Flame's profound acupoints were glowing with dazzling blue light as he took a stride forward, and Starpwer converged toward his fist as he threw a vicious punch toward an oncoming snow ape. The snow ape retaliated with a punch of its own, and the two fists clashed with immense power. A resounding boom rang out as a burst of tremendous force erupted out of Patriarch Cold Flame's fist, culminating in a formidable shockwave that spread through the air in all directions. The passageway that Han Li and Lu Yuking were situated in wasn't very wide, and as the shockwave swept through it, Lu Yuking involuntarily stumbled. Thankfully, Han Li was right beside her, and before she had a chance to cry out in surprise, he grabbed onto her sleeve with one hand while clasping his other hand over her mouth. At the same time, a faint light barrier emerged to encompass both of them. Only after the shockwaves had subsided did Han Li make a quieting gesture before slowly removing his hand from over Lu Yuking's mouth. Lu Yuking pursed her lips tightly as she pressed herself against the stone wall of the passageway, not daring to make another sound. Meanwhile, Han Li turned his attention back to Patriarch Cold Flame, and a contemplative look had appeared on his face. In the wake of the clash, the snow ape's arm had already completely exploded, and there was a rapidly revolving blue vortex where its arm used to be, absorbing the nearby glacial qi in order to facilitate regeneration. Patriarch Cold Flame naturally wasn't going to give it the chance to heal, and after evading an attack from the other snow ape, he sprang up into the air before stomping his foot heavily down onto the snow ape's head. A layer of white starlight appeared on the underside of his foot, and a resounding boom rang out as the snow ape's head exploded under the tremendous force of his stomp. A translucent frost core shot out of its head before being caught in Patriarch Cold Flame's grasp, and he quickly flipped his other hand over to produce a purple talisman that he adhered to the frost core, then hurriedly stowed it away into his storage ring. Immediately thereafter, he sprang up into the air once again, charging toward the other snow ape. Right at this moment, a sharp screeching sound rang out from up above, and an enormous streak of golden swordlight swept through the air. The snow dove was struck by the streak of golden swordlight, and its body was instantly torn in half down the middle. The streak of golden swordlight continued onward, and the roof of the cave was unable to withstand its tremendous power, as giant rocks the size of millstones came crashing down from above, opening up a massive rift that was several dozen feet wide. A ray of natural light shone down through the rift in the roof of the cave, and gusts of fierce wind also blew in through the rift. Xingshan stood atop the pile of fallen rocks as he slowly withdrew his longsword while casting his gaze toward Patriarch Cold Flame. The battle over there had drawn to a conclusion as well. The second snow ape also proved to be no match for Patriarch Cold Flame's tremendous starpor, and its head had exploded into powder with a single punch along with the frost core inside. Let me remind you that the circumstances surrounding this emergence of the infernal frost immortal manor are far more complex than on previous occasions, so we cannot afford to take any further detours from here onward, Xingshan said in a cold voice as Patriarch Cold Flame approached him. It was only discovered during the previous emergence of the immortal manor that the already explored area of the immortal manor is collectively known as the Light Frost region. The Light Frost region is only the outermost section of the infernal frost immortal manor, and there's no telling what manors of treasures could be found deeper in the immortal manor. With that in mind, it's no wonder that the circumstances have become a lot more complicated, Patriarch Cold Flame sighed. We've only managed to sneak into the immortal manor on this occasion through the Transient Guild and the ubiquitous pavilion. Surely you don't need me to tell you how much of a risk we're taking here, Xingshan said with solemn expression. Of course I'm aware of that. However, there's no need to be overly concerned. That place is situated in a very secluded area, and all of the other people who discovered it with us back then have already perished, so there's no way anyone would find that place before we get there, Patriarch Cold Flame replied. Xingshan's expression eased slightly upon hearing this, and he said, "In any case, let's get there as soon as possible, and after we've obtained what we want from that place, we can split up and go our separate ways." "That's precisely my intention as well," Patriarch Cold Flame replied with a nod. With that, the two of them didn't waste any more time as they rose up into the air, flying through the rift in the roof of the cave to emerge into the wind and snow outside. "Let's follow them," Han Li said to Lu Yuking, then flew out of the passageway. While Lu Yuking hesitated momentarily before following along. Lu Yuking's cultivation base was far inferior to that of Han Li, Patriarch Cold Flame, and the others, so she was naturally struggling to keep up. Han Li noticed this, and he raised a hand to summon his azure flying boat, then gestured for her to fly on board. Lu Yuking offered him her gratitude, then flew onto the spirit boat, as did Han Li. Immediately thereafter, he began to chant an incantation, then swept a sleeve through the air to release a ball of heavy water, which transformed into a layer of black light that quickly spread over the boat to envelop it in its entirety. Enshrouded within the black light barrier, all of the spiritual power fluctuations emanating from the spirit boat instantly subsided, and it transformed into an undetectable shadow that wasn't giving off even the slightest aura. Han Li gave a pleased nod upon seeing this. This was a concealment ability that he had invented by combining his heavy water and the laws of water that he had gleaned, and it seemed that it was quite effective. As the flying boat continued onward, it didn't take long before it caught up to Patriarch Cold Flame and Xingshan, but Han Li made sure to stay out of their spiritual sensory range, trailing along behind them from afar. Why are we following them, Brother Liu? Lu Yuking asked. She didn't dare to release her spiritual sense earlier for fear of being detected, so she didn't hear the conversation between Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan. Judging from their earlier conversation, they seem to have discovered an interesting place the last time the Immortal Manor was opened, and they're revisiting that place now. This is our first time in the Infernal Frost Immortal Manor, so we don't know much about it at all, and this isn't one of the areas on your map, so as opposed to stumbling around without any direction, we may as well follow them, Han Li explained. It sounds like we're in luck. These two are quite formidable, but they're no match for you, Brother Liu. If they're going after some treasures, then we can just spring up on them at the last second and claim those treasures for ourselves, Lu Yuking said with a smile. Han Li also smiled in response, then began to focus his attention on tracking Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan. He wasn't concerned about Patriarch Cold Flame, but Xing Shan possessed quite an advanced cultivation base and was also very cautious and alert, so he didn't dare to take him lightly. Lu Yuking could see that Han Li was trying to focus, so she fell silent in order to refrain from disturbing him, then sat down with her legs crossed on the spirit boat to meditate. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the Immortal Manor, there was a vast ice field that spread as far as the eyes could see in all directions, and aside from some small hills, there was only a lone snow-covered peak at the center of the ice field, extending all the way up into the clouds. The area was very quiet aside from the sound of the occasional gusts of wind, and right at this moment, a semi-transparent white vortex emerged in front of the lone peak amid a burst of spatial fluctuations. The vortex then faded to reveal a green jade flying carriage that was around 100 feet in length. The carriage was long and sleek, and there were intricate engravings on its surface, much like what one would expect to see on a jade scepter. Standing on the carriage was a tall man, and there were also a pair of halberd-wielding puppets clad in golden armor on the carriage. The man's entire body was enshrouded within a layer of white light, giving him a rather hazy appearance, but one could still just barely make out his facial features. As soon as he appeared, he swept his gaze over the surrounding area before setting his sights on a certain direction. "It looks like I'm not too late," the man murmured to himself, following which the flying carriage beneath his feet shot forward as a ball of green light, vanishing into the distant sky shortly thereafter. Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan continued in their travels without pause, and 3 or 4 days flew by in the blink of an eye. At this point, the vast ice field down below had been replaced by a mountainous region that was covered in a thick layer of glistening ice and snow, presenting a spectacular sight to behold. Occasionally, some clusters of palaces could be spotted among the snow-covered mountains, and some were even releasing hints of spiritual power fluctuations, indicating that they contained certain treasures. However, Patriarch Cold Flame's duo didn't even bother to take a glance at any of these buildings as they continued to fly onward. Han Li was rather intrigued and wanted to go down to take a look, but he had no opportunity to do so as he had to keep following the duo. "Looks like they're going someplace very far away. I hope they won't disappoint us," Lu Yuking sighed. "Let's just wait and see," Han Li replied with a nod. A few more days passed by in a flash, but even after flying for so long, they still didn't seem any closer to reaching the end of the light frost region. Han Li was quite taken aback to see this. He had thought that this was only an immortal manor, yet the light frost region alone seemed to be comparable in size to the Black Wind Sea. With that in mind, the entirety of the immortal manor was most likely just as enormous as a small plain. Patriarch Cold Flame showed no intention of stopping as they continued to fly onward, and a few more days passed by in the blink of an eye. The snow-covered mountains below gradually faded away, and a boundless sea emerged up ahead. The water in the sea was as black as inky and appeared to be extremely viscous, as evidenced by the fact that there weren't many waves sweeping over the surface of the sea despite the fierce wind. The entire surface of the sea resembled an infinitely vast black mirror, presenting a rather unsettling sight to behold. Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan flew directly onward without any hesitation, but Hanli stopped at the edge of the Black Sea with slightly furrowed brows. Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan had been flying without pause this entire time, and he couldn't help but wonder if they had perhaps already noticed him and Yuking, and were intentionally leading them into a trap. In this unfamiliar environment that was fraught with peril, he couldn't afford to get complacent. He cast his gaze toward the Black Sea up ahead, then turned to Yuking as he asked, "Do you know anything about this Black Sea?" "I'm afraid not, Brother Liu," Yuking replied with a shake of her head. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and he fell into deep thought. Yuking took a glance at her surroundings, then asked, "Should we keep following them, Brother Liu?" At this point, she was also beginning to grow a little uneasy. Han Li was silent for a moment, then replied, "It would be a waste to stop here after following them for so long. I want to see this through to the end." With that, he made a hand seal and spurred the azure flying boat onward. At this point, Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan had already vanished out of sight, but that wasn't a cause for concern as Han Li could still follow the spiritual power traces that they had left behind. It didn't take long for Han Li to catch up to the duo, and close to 2 more days passed by in a flash. Han Li was standing atop his flying boat with slightly furrowed brows. He didn't know just how vast this Black Sea was, but after flying for so long, he was certain that they were already quite deep in the area. They had already been following Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan for close to 10 days. If they had spent that time searching for treasures on their own, they would have been sure to have reaped some spoils, yet they were still empty-handed right now, and they could only hope that the duo that they were following really was leading them to some exceptional treasures. Otherwise, the incurred opportunity cost would be quite significant. All of a sudden, Han Li leaned forward slightly as if he had spotted something up ahead. "What is it, Brother Liu?" Yuking asked. As soon as her voice trailed off, clouds of white mist suddenly appeared over the sea up ahead. Specks of white light were visible within the mist, presenting a rather peculiar sight to behold. Wisps of bone-chilling glacial chi were emanating out of the white mist, significantly lowering the nearby air temperature. A contemplative look appeared on Yuking's face upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan stopped in their tracks, and they were ecstatic to see this white mist. "We finally found it," Patriarch Cold Flame exclaimed in an excited voice, and his elation was mirrored on Xing Shan's face as well. The two of them then inspected their surroundings momentarily to check if they were being followed. At this point, Han Li's flying boat had also drawn to a halt, and his eyes instantly lit up as he heard the exchange between Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan. It seemed that they had finally arrived at their destination. As Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan began to scour their surroundings, Han Li hurriedly backtracked a little with his flying boat. Thankfully, Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan didn't notice anything amiss, and they quickly continued onward, flying into the mist at a far faster speed than before. Han Li's azure flying boat also accelerated at his behest, and as soon as it flew into the white mist, it was instantly infiltrated by bursts of glacial chi. This glacial chi was quite peculiar in that it resembled needles, making it extremely penetrative, able to pierce through the heavy water barrier, and a layer of frost was slowly beginning to appear on the surface of the flying boat. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he swept a sleeve through the air to release a set of several dozen small blue flags that flew to the edges of the flying boat before vanishing into it. a blue light barrier instantly emerged to envelop the flying boat, keeping the glacial chi at bay. Right at this moment, Lu Yuking suddenly sprang to her feet. Han Li was slightly alarmed and he immediately asked, "What's wrong?" "Brother Liu, I just recalled a rumor about the light frost region. It's said that there's a sea of mist in the region that contains extremely formidable glacial chi, and within the sea of mist lies the Light Frost Palace, the premier treasure trove of the entire region. However, no one has ever been able to find it. Could it be?" Han Li's eyes immediately lit up upon hearing this. Thinking back to the excitement that Patriarch Cold Flame and Cheng Shan had displayed while discussing their destination, it was very likely that their objective was indeed to reach this Light Frost Palace. With that in mind, Han Li immediately spurred on his flying boat to accelerate a little further. The more they advanced through this area, the denser the white mist became until visibility was virtually zero. However, Patriarch Cold Flame and Cheng Shan seemed to be very familiar with this place, and they were traversing through the mist without pause. After flying for around 3 hours, the two of them abruptly drew to a halt. Han Li had been keeping tabs on them this entire time, and he immediately stopped as well, concealing his flying boat in a cloud of white mist as he cast his gaze forward. His eyes then instantly lit up as he spotted a black island situated in the sea up ahead. It was only a small island that was around 10 to 15 kilometers in size, and it was entirely enshrouded in a layer black light that looked as if it were formed by countless tiny black needles. The black light was flowing like liquid, and beyond the black light barrier was the faint outline of a majestic palace. Patriarch Cold Flame and Cheng Shan were observing the island down below with excitement in their eyes. "It looks like no one's found this place yet," Patriarch Cold Flame remarked as he took a glance at his surroundings. "That's only to be expected. This is an extremely secluded place, and I wouldn't have stumbled upon this island back then if I hadn't been frantically fleeing from that pack of frost beasts," Cheng Shan replied as he stared at the palace within the light barrier with fervent excitement in his eyes. "You seem very confident, fellow Taoist Cheng Shan. You must have made some extensive preparations for this trip," Patriarch Cold Flame chuckled. "I bet you've done the same, fellow Taoist Cold Flame. You've most likely already completely mastered the great universe origin arts. I'm assuming you weren't going all out against those frost beasts from earlier," Cheng Shan harumphed coldly in response. "How could my paltry powers possibly compare with yours?" Patriarch Cold Flame chuckled in a modest fashion. The two of them exchanged a glance, and both of them fell silent as a slightly tense atmosphere began to set in. "We still haven't entered the Light Frost Palace yet, so there's no need for the two of us to be praising one another like this. Besides, our objectives are different, so there are no conflicts of interest between us. Let's break this restriction as quickly as possible to avoid any unforeseen mishaps," Patriarch Cold Flame proposed. "That sounds like a good plan," Cheng Shan replied with a smile, then patted the storage pouch strapped to his waist, and a small golden sword instantly emerged, followed immediately by an azure wooden ruler and a small blue flag. All three treasures were giving off astonishing spiritual chi fluctuations, and they weren't far off from immortal treasures. At the same time, Patriarch Cold Flame swept a sleeve through the air to release 2 bursts of light, one red and one yellow, and they were revealed to be a crimson bowl and a small yellow seal, both of which were also top-grade spirit treasures. As soon as the 5 spirit treasures were summoned, they immediately flew high up into the sky as 5 dazzling balls of spiritual light before vanishing out of sight in a flash. The sky up above shuddered as a vast expanse of radiant 5-colored light emerged, encompassing the entire area within a radius of dozens of kilometers down below. The 5 spirit treasures were visible deep within the 5-colored light, and they had formed a circular formation. All of the world's origin chi and the space encompassed within the five-colored light became completely stagnant, as if it had been frozen in place by some type of invisible force. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly as he observed what was unfolding up ahead using his bright sight spirit eyes. "What are they doing, Brother Liu?" Lu Yuking asked. "They're using spirit treasures of the five elements to unleash the great five-elemental true light," Han Li replied. As the two were conversing with one another, Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan had already begun chanting an incantation, upon which the five-colored light swirled momentarily before quickly transforming into a five-colored pillar of light that shone down upon the black light barrier. The black light barrier instantly brightened, and countless threads of thin black light emerged one after another like streaks of black sword chi, then converged to form a black sword dragon that pounced at the pillar of five-colored light. The two clashed, and the black sword dragon was able to keep the pillar of light at bay while tearing at it viciously with its claws, fangs, and tail. Streaks of formidable black sword chi were erupting out of the sword dragon's claws and mouth, but the pillar of five-colored light remained stable and completely unmoved despite the sword dragon's best efforts. Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan continued to chant their incantation while making hand seals, and five-colored spiritual light was rapidly revolving within the pillar of light, forming a series of five-colored balls. Each ball was the size of a millstone, and all of them were semi-transparent. They were quite spectacular to behold, but also struck the beholder with a sense of awe and foreboding. The five-colored spiritual light at the forefront of the pillar of light flashed momentarily, following which all of the balls of five-colored light shot forth, crashing into the black sword dragon's body. The five-colored balls of light then exploded into a vast expanse of light that completely inundated the black sword, tearing it apart with ease amid an anguished howl. Lu Yuking's eyes widened with incredulity upon seeing this, while Han Li's expression remained unchanged, and it seemed that this was the anticipated outcome for him. After vanquishing the sword dragon, the five-colored balls of light continued onward without pause to strike the black light barrier down below, which instantly began to warp and twist violently. In the end, the black light barrier was only able to withstand the assault for a few seconds before it was torn apart and disintegrated into countless specks of black spiritual light. However, an azure light barrier then emerged, and it seemed to be no less formidable than the black light barrier. Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan didn't seem surprised at all to see this, and the five-colored pillar of light continued to descend, while releasing more five-colored balls of light that surged toward the azure light barrier. The five-colored light barrier brightened considerably, while releasing gusts of fierce azure wind, and a string of earth-shattering booms rang out as the gusts of wind clashed against the balls of five-colored light. Ultimately, the azure light barrier wasn't able to fare much better than its black counterpart, and it only lasted a few minutes before it was also torn apart, following which a white light barrier emerged. Han Li raised an eyebrow upon seeing this. The restrictions outside the palace were more complex than he had imagined, and they were all quite formidable, so even for him, it would have taken a great deal of time and effort to bypass them. However, judging from the expressions of Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan, they were clearly already aware of this and had prepared countermeasures. The two of them continued to make more hand seals, and the five-colored pillar of light shone brighter and brighter as more balls of five-colored light emerged before raining down upon the white light barrier. Several hours passed by in the blink of an eye, and rumbling booms were ringing out incessantly on the island, while spiritual lights of different colors flashed erratically. The five-colored pillar of light had become thicker than before, and it was releasing countless balls of five-colored light that were raining down upon a gray light barrier. The gray restriction was releasing extremely dense gray light that formed a dark gray cloud, and all of the balls of five-colored light that fell upon it exploded violently on contact. The gray cloud didn't appear to be remarkable in any way, but it proved to be extremely resilient, able to keep the barrage of five-colored balls of light at bay, albeit with great difficulty. At this point, Patriarch Cold Flame and Qingshan were both looking rather weary. During this time, they had already broken through over 10 different restrictions, of which each successive one was more formidable than the previous one, and the balls of five-colored light weren't making inroads anywhere near as quickly as before. However, the barrages of attacks were still effective, and the gray cloud was slowly being stripped away bit by bit. Close to an hour later, the gray cloud was finally completely eradicated, thereby revealing the gray restriction down below. Both Patriarch Cold Flame and Qingshan instantly seized this opportunity, renewing their efforts to send close to 100 balls of five-colored light erupting out of the pillar of light at once. Instead of crashing down right away, the balls of light converged to form an enormous ball of light the size of a house. Furthermore, this ball of light was no longer semi-transparent. Instead, it had a virtually substantial form and was giving off astonishing spiritual power fluctuations. The giant ball of light circled around in the air before crashing heavily down onto the gray restriction and exploding violently. A five-colored sun that was over 1,000 feet in diameter appeared in the sky, and shockwaves that were visible even to the naked eye erupted forth in all directions, causing the surrounding space to tremble violently. The gray light barrier was severely warped before exploding, and Patriarch Cold Flame and Qingshan heaved a collective sigh of relief upon seeing this. Han Li was observing the proceedings from afar, and he was also quite pleased to see the restriction being broken. The gray light barrier disintegrated into countless specks of gray light that quickly dissipated, only to be replaced by another starry light barrier. There were countless starry specks of light on the light barrier, and they were moving in a profound rhythm, as if they really were stars in the night sky. "There's still more. How many restrictions are there?" Lu Yuking exclaimed upon seeing this. "Don't worry, this should be the last one. Those two sure have been made to work hard," Han Li replied with a faint smile. Right at this moment, his expression suddenly changed slightly as a burst of dazzling starlight emerged to encompass his entire body, and the source of the starlight was the storage pouch strapped to his waist. The starlight was extremely bright, and it immediately burst through his concealment ability. Lu Yuking was greatly startled by this unforeseen turn of events, and she had to clap a hand over her own mouth to prevent herself from yelling out loud. The starry light barrier in the distance also began to glow brightly, and the specks of starlight moving over its surface suddenly accelerated by severalfold, forming a series of profound constellations. It seemed that the starry light barrier was resonating, with the starlight radiating from Han Li's body. Patriarch Cold Flame and Qingshan were also caught completely off guard, and they immediately swung around with bewildered expressions. Han Li immediately tried to search for the source of the starlight in his storage pouch, only for a ball of dazzling starlight to fly out from within on its own, containing a gray stone slab. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this. This was the very same stone slab that contained the first half of the great universe origin arts that he had obtained from Patriarch Cold Flame. At this moment, all of the runes etched upon the stone slab were glowing with radiant starlight, and as soon as it appeared, it immediately began flying toward the starry light barrier in the distance as if it were being summoned by something. The stone slab was quite valuable to Han Li, and this was clearly an abnormal turn of events, so Han Li certainly wasn't going to just let it fly away, and he immediately reached out to grab it. The starlight radiating from the stone slab began to sway and struggle, as it attempted to force its way out of Han Li's grasp. And it was doing so with such tremendous force that even Han Li's arm was trembling incessantly. If an average late true immortal cultivation had been in his place, there was a very good chance that the stone slab would have already flown out of their grasp. With his attention diverted, there was a momentary lapse in his concealment secret technique, and as a result, he and Lu Yuking were exposed. "Who's there?" Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan immediately stopped what they were doing as they spotted Han Li's duo, and as a result, the pillar of five-colored light in the sky faded into nothingness. Lu Yuking reflexively took a couple of steps backward at the sight of the hostile looks on the faces of Patriarch Cold Flame and Xing Shan, and she turned to Han Li with a concerned expression. Han Li's brows were slightly furrowed, and he did away with his concealment secret technique altogether. Xing Shan took a glance at Han Li's duo, then said, "If I recall correctly, the two of you entered the Immortal Manor with the true Flame sect. Why are you sneaking around and following us in secret?" "That stone slab, your fellow Taoist Han," Patriarch Cold Flame exclaimed at the sight of the gray stone slab that Han Li was holding. "Long time no see, fellow Taoist Cold Flame," Han Li said with a faint smile. At the same time, he made a hand seal with his free hand, and countless azure runes instantly surged out of the hand that was locked around the stone slab, forming a seal around it. The light radiating from the stone slab instantly diminished significantly, and its struggles also ceased. Han Li then flipped a hand over to produce several talismans, which he adhered to the stone slab in an unhurried fashion, and only then did the starlight on the stone slab completely vanish, following which he was able to stow it away. "Fellow Taoist Han, do you know this person, fellow Taoist Cold Flame?" Xing Shan asked as he turned to Patriarch Cold Flame with a suspicious expression. "Please don't misunderstand, fellow Taoist. I've met him on several past occasions, but I definitely wasn't expecting to run into him here," Patriarch Cold Flame hurriedly explained. Lu Yuking's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. "Even if he is an acquaintance of yours, isn't it far too rude of him to have followed us in secret all the way up to this point?" Xing Shan asked in a cold voice. "I just so happened to see the two of you traveling together, and it seemed that you were going somewhere, so I decided to follow you out of curiosity. I certainly wasn't expecting to be led to the Light Frost Palace. Given how massive this palace is, surely you two won't mind if the two of us enter it with you," Han Li said with a smile. At the same time, he casually made a hand seal, and the azure flying boat beneath his feet instantly shrank down significantly before flying up his sleeve. He then swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of azure light, which swept up himself and Lu Yuking before carrying both of them to a spot not far away from Xing Shan's duo. Patriarch Cold Flame's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and he turned to Xing Shan. Back at the Holy Puppet Sect, he had already established that he was no match for Han Li, and he didn't want to engage Han Li in a direct battle unless there were no other alternatives. Xing Shan's expression darkened slightly, and a cold gleam flashed through his eyes as he said, "If you want to enter the Light Frost Palace, then you'll have to show me if you have what it takes." As soon as his voice trailed off, his robes billowed outward as golden light erupted out of his body, and thick streaks of golden sword chi emerged, resembling the branches of a flowering tree as they swept directly toward Han Li with astonishing might. Initially, each streak of sword chi was only around a foot in length, but they swelled to close to 100 feet mid-flight, and they had converged to form a golden sword lotus flower that was descending directly upon Han Li. Even before the sword lotus flower arrived, a burst of formidable sword intent had already completely enshrouded Han Li and Lu Yuking. Han Li felt a burst of sharp pain over his entire body, and the flashing golden light radiating from the sword lotus flower struck him with some type of illusion, as if he could already see himself being torn to shreds by the streaks of sword chi. He immediately drew upon his own vast spiritual sense as an instinctive reaction, and the illusion was instantly dispelled. In contrast, there was a horrified look on Lu Yuking's face, and her eyes were dazed and hollow, as if she had been plunged into the depths of despair by Qingshan's immense sword intent. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and he positioned himself in front of Lu Yuking as 18 specks of starlight emerged over his body. As a result, he instantly grew a little taller, then threw a punch directly upward. A burst of tremendous force was released from his fist, causing the surrounding space to warp and twist, and ripples that were visible even to the naked eye could be seen sweeping through the air. The golden sword lotus flower's downward momentum was instantly halted, following which it shattered and disintegrated into countless specks of golden light. The tremendous sword intent in the air also faded with the sword lotus flower's destruction, and Lu Yuking shuddered before gasping for air, but at the very least, she had returned to her senses. She had been completely immobilized by the sword intent just now, but she was still able to see what had just unfolded, and a complex look appeared in her eyes as she cast her gaze toward Han Li, who was standing up ahead with his back facing her. The fearsome power released by Han Li's punch was only stopped momentarily by the golden sword lotus flower, before continuing to sweep toward Qingshan with astonishing might. Qingshan instantly felt the space around him constrict, and it was as if he had suddenly been trapped within a wall of iron and steel. "You're also using the great universe origin arts," Qingshan exclaimed as he made a hand seal with one hand, and his golden longsword instantly appeared in his grasp. With his longsword summoned, his aura began to rapidly swell and take on a peerlessly sharp quality. Immediately thereafter, he let loose a thunderous roar before slashing his longsword through the air with a flick of his wrist, and several huge streaks of golden sword chi swept through the air around him to free him from the constricting space. He then began to chant an incantation, and his golden longsword flew out of his grasp before transforming into a giant golden sword that was several thousand feet in size, giving off formidable metal attribute law fluctuations. The giant golden sword slashed through the air before crashing into the force generated by Han Li's punch with an earth-shattering boom, and neither side seemed to be able to get the better of the other, with sword chi and fist intent erupting in all directions, causing the surrounding space to tremble violently. Right at this moment, an indetectable smirk appeared on Qingshan's face, and a giant golden flag abruptly appeared behind Han Li amid a burst of spatial fluctuations. The flag was radiating golden light with countless runes flashing on its surface, and it was also giving off bursts of metal law fluctuations. As soon as the golden flag appeared, it instantly released countless thin golden threads that shot rapidly toward Han Li's defenseless back. Lu Yuking's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, but the golden threads were too fast for her to react to. Right as the two of them were about to completely inundated by the wave of golden threads, a burst of starlight suddenly flashed over Han Li's body, and the 7 bright star rings flew out, arranging themselves into the formation of the Big Dipper as they situated themselves behind Han Li and Lu Yuking. Radiant starlight erupted out of the 7 bright star rings, instantly forming a thick wall of light. A string of dull thuds rang out in rapid succession as countless tiny holes were pierced into the surface of the wall of light, but it was ultimately able to keep all of the golden threads at bay, much to Qingshan's alarm and dismay. Right at this moment, another resounding boom rang out as Qingshan's giant golden sword was sent flying back through the air, while the tremendous force unleashed by Han Li's punch also faded away. All of this had transpired in the blink of an eye, and Han Li remained standing on the spot in a calm and composed fashion, while Xing Shan stumbled back a couple of steps before steadying himself. He then made a hand seal, and the giant golden sword shrank down to half its original size before circling around in the air above his head. Han Li paid no heed to the giant sword as he glowered intently at Han Li and the 7 bright star rings behind him. The 7 bright star rings had appeared at the perfect time, and it was as if Han Li were a clairvoyant that had predicted the emergence of the giant golden flag. "I've been here this entire time, so did you think that I wouldn't notice when you summoned that golden flag in secret before concealing it while the two of you were breaking the restrictions here?" Han Li asked with a faint smile. Xing Shan's expression darkened even further upon hearing this, and he made a hand seal, upon which the giant golden flag vanished from the spot before appearing behind him the next instant. "I wonder if you had summoned that golden flag as a precautionary measure to deal with unforeseen danger, or if you were planning to use it on someone else," Han Li said with a faint smile as he took a meaningful glance at Patriarch Cold Flame. A furious look immediately appeared on Patriarch Cold Flame's face upon hearing this, and he flew over 1,000 feet away from Xing Shan in the blink of an eye. "Don't fall for his attempt to drive a wedge between us, fellow Taoist Cold Flame. I had no other intention than to take some precautionary measures in case enemies arrived on the scene while we were busy breaking these restrictions, and it seems that my efforts were very much necessary," Xing Shan said. Patriarch Cold Flame's expression eased slightly upon hearing this, but he was still looking rather hesitant about who to believe. "Is that so? In that case, why did you summon the flag in secret without telling fellow Taoist Cold Flame?" Han Li asked with a faint smile. "That was indeed an oversight on my part," Xing Shan conceded in a slightly awkward manner. He hadn't actually summoned the flag for the purpose of attacking Patriarch Cold Flame. Instead, it was just a hidden trump card that he could call upon to seize the initiative in the case of any mishaps. Of course, he was prepared to use it against Patriarch Cold Flame if necessary, but given the circumstances, things weren't so easy to explain. "You're not to blame, fellow Taoist Xing. I was simply too gullible and susceptible to the words of others," Patriarch Cold Flame said in an indifferent voice. Xing Shan knew that he was at fault here, so he didn't dwell on the subject any longer. "I would consider you to be an acquaintance of mine, fellow Taoist Cold Flame. There are bound to be many precious treasures in this Light Frost Palace. It's sure to be a very dangerous place as well, so why don't we join forces and explore it together? You're aware of my powers, and I'm sure you know that I can be of great assistance to you," Han Li said. Patriarch Cold Flame's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and he offered no response. "Rest assured, fellow Taoist Cold Flame, I simply want to repay you for bestowing the great universe origin arts upon me. I'm no saint, but at the same time, I wouldn't stoop as low as to plot against my own allies," Han Li said as he took a subtle glance at Xing Shan, in response to which Xing Shan gave a cold harumph. Patriarch Cold Flame weighed up his options for a moment, then smiled as he said, "All right, in that case, I'll be in your care, fellow Taoist Han." "Likewise, fellow Taoist Cold Flame, shall we break this final restriction first?" Han Li proposed with a smile. "What is the meaning of this?" Xing Shan interjected with a dark look on his face. "Please don't misunderstand, fellow Taoist Xing. It's not like there's any vendetta between us, it's just that you attacked me without allowing me a chance to explain myself, and that resulted in a misunderstanding. In my opinion, let's leave this matter behind us. At the moment, all of us have a shared objective, so we should work together to break this restriction. Time is of the essence after all," Han Li said as he turned to Xing Shan. Xing Shan was silent for a moment, then smiled as he replied, "I agree, fellow Taoist Han. Please forgive me for my earlier rash actions, fellow Taoist Cold Flame. If we do find any treasures in the palace, you can have the first pick." There's no need to apologize, fellow Taoist Xingshan. Now that fellow Taoist Han and this fellow Taoist have joined us, our chances of success will naturally be greater than before. By the way, may I know your name, fellow Taoist? Patriarch Cold Flame asked as he turned to Lu Yuking. Xingshan also turned his attention to Lu Yuking upon hearing this. You're far too kind, senior. I wouldn't dare to regard myself as an equal to the two of you with my paltry cultivation base. I'm only accompanying Brother Han to broaden my horizons, and I would be more than satisfied if you could spare me a few treasures that aren't up to your standards, Lu Yuking hurriedly replied. It was clear that Han Li had presented himself under a different identity to Patriarch Cold Flame, so she had immediately made an adjustment and begun referring to Han Li as Brother Han instead of Brother Liu. Both Patriarch Cold Flame and Xingshan's expressions eased slightly upon hearing this. The more time we waste here, the higher the likelihood that something could go wrong, so let's begin right away. Keep doing what you were doing before, and I'll also lend you my assistance to break this restriction, Han Li said. Patriarch Cold Flame and Xingshan both nodded in response, and the latter swept a sleeve through the air to stow away his golden longsword and golden flag, then flew to the same position as before to resume his efforts. Patriarch Cold Flame also sprang into action, and the 5 spirit treasures in the air lit up once again as the pillar of 5-colored light re-emerged. A layer of dazzling starlight emerged from the starry light barrier, and there were countless stars surging over its surface, presenting a profound sight to behold. Balls of 5-colored light flew out of the pillar of light before striking the starry light barrier, and a string of resounding booms rang out as the starry light barrier trembled incessantly. Meanwhile, Han Li stowed his 7 bright star rings away, then channeled his great universe origin arts with all his might, and radiant starlight instantly appeared over his arms. Immediately thereafter, he lashed out at the starlight restriction down below with ferocious might, unleashing a barrage of fist projections that rained down upon the starry light barrier. Lu Yuking was also doing what she could to help, summoning an azure feather fan that she swept through the air to send countless azure blades of wind hurtling toward the starry light barrier. Their combined efforts were extremely formidable, and the starry light barrier was unable to withstand the assault, quickly being stripped down to only a thin layer. However, right at this moment, the sky above the island suddenly began to rumble, and the white mist up above began to swirl, forming an enormous vortex. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he looked up into the sky, while Xingshan yelled, "The restriction is trying to draw upon starpower from the heavens to replenish itself. If we can't destroy it now, it won't be long until it makes a full recovery, so it's now or never," Xingshan yelled. "That's right, we can't allow it to recover," Patriarch Cold Flame chimed in. The two of them made a rapid series of hand seals, and the pillar of 5-colored light brightened considerably as countless balls of 5-colored light shot out from within, then converged to form another enormous ball of light in the blink of an eye before descending toward the starry light barrier. Han Li also responded to the call, taking on his giant mountain ape form amid a flash of golden light. At the same time, 18 specks of starlight appeared on his chest, an abdomen to complement the golden light radiating from the rest of his body. The giant mountain ape pounded its own chest with its fists, then let loose a thunderous roar before swinging its fist viciously through the air. An enormous golden fist projection instantly appeared with streaks of starlight revolving around it, and the fist projection fell upon the starry light barrier. Lu Yuking also renewed her efforts as her azure feather fan began to radiate dazzling azure light, and it released an azure wind dragon that swooped down with ferocious might. Several earth-shattering booms rang out in succession, and a series of cracks finally began to spread over the starry light barrier. With one final resounding boom, The starry light barrier exploded into a vast expanse of starlight. But instead of dissipating, all of the starlight rapidly converged to form an enormous vortex that was releasing indescribably formidable suction power. Han Li and the others didn't have any time to react before they were sucked into the vortex, and Han Li was instantly overcome by a rush of dizziness as the entire world transformed into an indistinguishable blur. Upon recovering his vision, he found himself standing on a spacious stone platform. Patriarch Cold Flame and the others were also nearby, but their eyes were tightly shut, seemingly still yet to regain consciousness. The stone platform was quite antiquated in appearance. It had a dark azure hue and was over 1,000 feet in size. Beneath Han Li and the others was a teleportation formation that was still operating and radiating bursts of white light. Han Li was still feeling a little dizzy, and he shook his head vigorously to clear away the dizziness before inspecting his surroundings. At this moment, he was situated in a blue space with a sun up above. There were white clouds drifting through the sky and a light breeze blowing through the air, in stark contrast with the misty and forbidding Black Sea from before. This must be the real Light Frost Palace. Around half a kilometer ahead of the stone platform was a mountain with a summit that was concealed within the clouds, indicating that it had to have been at least 40,000 to 50,000 feet tall. The mountain was extremely steep and entirely silver in color. There was a ball of faint purple light situated on the mountain summit, and Han Li could see the outlines of a purple palace within the ball of light. A steep staircase extended straight from the purple palace to the foot of the mountain, and the staircase was a sparkling purple color, presenting a spectacular sight to behold, as if it were a staircase to heaven. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. For some reason, this environment struck him with a sense of familiarity. He inspected his surroundings once again while trying to recall when he had seen this place before, but to no avail, so he could only set aside that train of thought for now as he prepared to leave the teleportation formation. However, as soon as he attempted to leave the formation, a burst of tremendous force surged out of it, locking his body into place and rendering him immobilized. He immediately cast his gaze toward the white light around him, and a contemplative look flashed through his eyes. Before long, Patriarch Cold Flame, Shan, and Lu Yuking also regained their consciousness one after another, and Lu Yuking began to look around with an awestruck expression. In contrast, Patriarch Cold Flame and Shan completely ignored their surroundings as they turned to stare at the purple palace on the mountain summit with a fervent look in their eyes. However, neither of them moved. So this is the Light Frost Palace. It really is a spectacular place, Lu Yuking praised as she tried to take a step forward, only to find herself also locked into place, just like Han Li. The teleportation formation is still operating. We'll only be able to get out once it completely ceases operation, Patriarch Cold Flame explained. Lu Yuking turned to him with a grateful nod upon hearing this, while Han Li also took a glance at him in silence. He had intentionally driven a wedge between Patriarch Cold Flame and Shan in order to recruit the former to his side, and he had done this because Patriarch Cold Flame had already entered this place once. Having explored many secret areas in the past, Han Li knew how much an asset having an experienced guide could be.